be discussing this at a future board meeting? I'm just wondering if the board desires to address Mr. Ubel's suggestion of earlier that we continue to have discussions.
Would the next committee of the board make sense, or is that already full?
I think we could put it on there. I'm just wondering if if the board would like to have further conversation to give direction for further conversation.
So we asked, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, we asked you, maybe it was at the start of when you were acting as an interim administrator, to think about a space planning for the entire county. And so I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. I mean, I think for me, an important part of this is understanding, if we don't participate, then what happens? What does our sheriff's department feel like is what what needs to happen in the long run? Once the jail is done, if the city is gone, then what happens? Because if our HVAC if our HVAC has to be replaced, if there are other remodeling things that we really must do at the existing LEC, I mean, we have to think about how much does that cost and hold that in comparison. I think that for me would make a difference.
Well, and life is all about timing. So, and one of the big keys, I think, till we get the jail up and running, to know how things are going to flow. We have no idea. I think the professionals probably have some, but the public and everything, how is everything going to flow? What did we put the light switches in the wrong place, or we got things, and we have to, get trained in using it to take this on right now. But I agree that the space.
But I think we will have to make some choices.
Right. But it's difficult not knowing how things are going to work out.
I think we'll have to make some choices. And so I think we have to have conversations, but I also think that we need input from you and from the rest of staff in terms of what you see in terms of other alternatives.
Because there are a lot of moving pieces, license center, public health. But wouldn't it make sense to keep the momentum? But I'm not saying that I'm for or against any of this, but just for the city's sake, wouldn't it be helpful to let them know sooner rather than later?
Yeah.
We don't need to decide. Like, the only feedback I've heard is people don't want to spend any more tax dollars. But I realize at some point you have to spend.
We will.
Yeah, have to spend something and somehow, et cetera. But just keep the momentum going. Would it make sense to put it on the next committee of the board and not decide?
Is that too soon? I mean, is that too soon?
Is that too soon?
No, I'm just asking your direction. I mean, I would like to keep it going if we can. But again, it's your direction.
Right. And we have a lot of other priorities in our day-to-day work that to put another thing, but I don't disagree. But I think the county board needs to come up with some, what are some of the pros and cons? We're hearing all these, this is all pro, this is all great, but there's a lot of cons to doing something too. So I think we need to determine what works for us and our tax paying group. And it's all, I don't care, bonding or whatever, it's all taxpayer dollars. It's not free money.
So is it okay with the rest of the board to put it on, just if nothing else, a short continued discussion, so we also leave time for the county recorder to give us presentation today.
Yep. Okay. Commissioner Olson? It's okay. Okay.
Sure.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Yep. Appreciate you coming. We had asked for updates from all our department heads because so much legislation happened this year. And so the first update is coming from the recorder's office, and Bob Bambenek is going to talk to us about changes made by the legislature, how they're affecting the county.
Well, good evening. And I think if you had the rest of the evening, you have a topic that is going to take a lot of discussion, the one prior to mine. So I appreciate it that you were able to work in a little time. When we met early this year to visit with our legislators, there was a lot of thought that went into the meeting. We were having the highest home prices in Winona County history. Our cost of living was approaching 6%, also another historic high. And we're also starting to see increases in the number of pending foreclosures. And we started out 21, there were 13, that was just business as normal. But in 22, it jumped to 29. And now in 23, it's beyond that. So with the amount of money that the Minnesota legislature was dealing with, it was important to let them know that there were challenges out here. And we had several different areas where they could assist us. So at the meeting, I asked if they would increase the homestead market value exclusion, the homestead credit and renter's refund, and also do a refund to Minnesota taxpayers from some of the big allotment of money that they had. In Winona especially, we are in need of more housing. We need new homes, we need improvement of existing homes, and we need some very keen incentives. We also need more workforce housing, and grants are one area that's been very, very positive and worked very well around the country. If the legislature put some money into that, maybe we'd be able to move ahead. So when the legislative session ended not very long ago, it seems that all of these areas received some very keen support. And I don't want to say it was just us. It was information, it was guidance that came from across the state. But we were in the lead. We were some of the first to meet with them. We kind of opened the door, and I'm really proud of where it went. Just a couple of details now. The homestead market value exclusion. It is increasing 25%. That is a nice increase. It'll be based on values in 24. It takes effect in 25. The homestead credit that you would normally apply for at the beginning of the year, and the checks are sent out in August, and also the renter's refund, they're both going to be increased, and it looks like 13.8%. And in addition to that, there's going to be a one-time mailing in the fall of $260 per eligible person. When you put all of that together, that should be of assistance to Winona County homeowners that are paying taxes in a very tight financial environment. There's two more though, and they're the biggest of the whole package. There were millions of dollars authorized for housing aid, improvement of existing housing. There was also a significant portion that was specified to be used for rental housing. There was a figure of 120 million that was authorized for affordable housing, and this is new affordable housing. And the big one was $1 billion was dedicated to apartments and first-time homeowners. And for that workforce housing that we talked about, 40 million was allocated. Where we're at this evening and having discussions with the planning department at the county, we feel that the guidelines are in, let's just say, the development stage, Minnesota Housing and a number of other state agencies. And we are working, and we're going to gear our housing committee to try to get this information, see what path we have to take. Just real quickly on the second page, I want to show this to you quickly. Many people don't understand the market exclusion, but it's right on your tax statement. You have to take a look for it. I took some history from two different homes. One's in Homer Township, the other in the city of Winona. Homer Township, as we expect in the township, a little bit higher value, a little bit higher tax statement there. But at the present and from the past years, starting in 2019 and coming forward, when you have your taxable market value, the exclusion is something that's taken from that. And in present time, it's been about 30%, and then it kind of fizzles out at a given number, a little over 500,000. The history of that shows pretty clearly here, and the intent is to try to hold the line on taxes. So if we take out a chunk of your value, hopefully it's going to hold your line on taxes. And when you're stressed, this can be a real benefit. So you can see if you look at the taxable market value of the home in Homer Township, you'll see where it has gone up in value. There was, and read from top to bottom. Now in 2024, you're going to have a home that, 10 years ago was almost 100,000 less. And the corresponding tax amount seems to be running fairly steady. It'll look even better than that in 25 when the new law fully takes effect. Same thing in the second one, just showing the exclusion. You've got a market value of 174,300. Your exclusion is 19,800 on the present program. And so you're paying a tax that's going to be more in line and more consistent with the numbers to the right. So that's the exclusion. It's something that I think can be very helpful. The next page is just information on the direct payment, about $260 per eligible person. The Department of Revenue is doing most of the work on it. They've got a number of different methods they're using to identify Minnesota residents that have paid their taxes in 21. And they say they're going to be mailing this out in the fall, but you have time to apply if you don't receive it until until sometime late this year. All right, and then just to mention a couple of the figures, and then this will wrap it up for tonight. The next page is the One Minnesota budget, and it starts out by saying that Governor Walz has signed. This isn't wishful thinking anymore, legislative proposals, it's actual law. $1,665 million for home investment in Minnesota. And then as we go on, there's a couple of them that relate directly to us. There's 72 million that's been allocated for public housing preservation. And we do have projects in Winona County that we will be looking closely to see if they will apply or not. On the next page, there's 60.5 million for workforce home ownership programs. And the details we are looking forward to receiving. We really feel that this is an area that could be very helpful in Winona County. And then the last one I want to mention is second paragraph to the bottom, 101.8 million to support down payment assistance programs and 50 million for first generation home buyers. Average price of a home this evening in Winona County is $234,000. It's gone up almost 16% in the last 2 years. So the percentage 16, it is a significant figure, but we are among the lower of the increases in the country. And we still have challenges for first-time home buyers. That money should be a help and should enable some folks to work past the threshold of building a home that would have an average price of $234,000. The median tonight, half more expensive and half less expensive, $215,000. So we've had increases. Tax dollars will be up if everything else stays equal, but it's not like many very troubled areas of the United States. We're very fortunate. So thank you for the time. Any questions?
Don't run.
Okay.
A lot of money.
It's
it one-
unbelievable.
Is it one-time money, or have they built into the system to keep these programs ongoing?
There's some of both. And the chairperson and I were at a briefing that Representative Plowski did this afternoon, and that was one of the questions that came up. And he has put a lot of his work into assuring that long-term ongoing programs were being brought to where they needed to be as part of this budget. So I think he is part of the answer to your question. Though the programs that we have in place that aren't being properly funded, he through committee meetings was able to get the funding, and there's a long list of them.
But
Everyone
I'm
has to
sorry,
wonder where it's
long-term
going.
or short, I mean, again,
Both.
both.
Yes, but everyone has to wonder where we're going. It says here it's historical. It's a one-time amount of money. We don't want to think we're going to be getting it again next year. I don't think.
That's the risk.
These amounts, there's a lot of things some people don't like about the last legislative session. I think most people agree this is good for everybody. There's large dollar amounts, $1 billion dedicated to apartments, first-time homeowners, $40 million for workforce housing. I'm interested in all this. I'm especially interested in workforce housing. Does this money, this is for both you and Ms. Holtby, does this money automatically flow to the counties, or are these competitive grants, or do you have to apply for those?
We're waiting to hear more about that. I read some of the,
Back there.
And later on, maybe we can also ask Buffy that question.
Yes.
Because my perception is we'll have to probably apply for some of
the
those.
legislation itself and a whole bunch of different chapters. It's not uncommon for one chapter to be over 1,000 pages. I spent a couple evenings reading through some of them to try to come up with some of the thought that is, part of the question you're asking. And there were some sentences that said the money would go directly to developers. There's no people in the middle. But does that mean that they apply and it's just given to them, or are they going to go through a process, and what's the process going to be? A lot of questions, and we've not had any state programs at this point where they said we're going to get together and talk about this, or we'd like your input. So we absolutely are wanting to know as well.
I'm proposing that we adjourn and take a 2-minute break.
Yes.
Be back here at 6. We are
Thank
adjourned.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Bob,
Thanks a lot.
keep tabs on it, Bob.
I read
A lot of money.
Money. So.
Oh, I know.
On stage job.
How are you?
How are you?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We start our meetings with a public comment period. So if there are folks here who would like to address the county board, we hope you could keep your comments to 2 minutes, but please step forward to the microphone. Please tell us your name and address, and then share your thoughts with us. I will ask 2 more times. If there's anyone here in the audience, and in addition to that, individuals who are participating via the internet are also eligible to participate in public comment. If you would like to share your thoughts with us, please unmute yourself and catch our attention by saying something. And for the third and final time, if there's anyone here in the audience or attending the meeting over the internet that would like to participate in public comment, please state your name and address and share your thoughts with us. Hearing no one, we'll move on. The next item on our agenda would be approval of a past county board minutes.
I'll move to approve July 11th meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Vagley has moved and Commissioner Ward has seconded approval of the county board minutes as in the packet from July 11th of 2023. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. If anyone's opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We next move on to our consent comments and the approval of the agenda. So this is the opportunity for commissioners to change the agenda if they desire. Commissioner Ward?
I would like to pull 6.2. I have a couple questions about that policy.
Mhm.
And then separate votes on 6.3 and 6.7, please.
Okay, so we're going to pull 6.2, 6.3, and 6.7. And because we have people here to speak to us, is it all right if I move these to be 7.6, 7.7, and 7.8?
Well, 6.3 and 6.7 will be I just want separate votes on those. So, that's fine. And 6.2, sure, we can move it till the end.
Okay, we'll move them to the end.
And I have one announcement at the end, please.
Commissioner Olson,
Nothing for me.
Mr. Vagley.
2 comments, please.
Okay, and I have nothing. So we would need to approve the amendments to the agenda to move forward?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I ask to have 6.3 pulled to the next agenda? We need to make a revision.
Okay, so
Right.
it was going to be 7.7, it's not.
Okay,
It will
so we
be,
just
we
delete.
will
Take
remove
her.
it, okay?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Great.
All right.
Anything from the county attorney's office?
No.
Okay. So we, a motion to approve the agenda as amended would be in order.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, Commissioner Olson has moved and Commissioner Vagley has seconded the agenda as amended. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 If anyone's opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Administrator Holte, would you read the consent agenda as it was amended?
6.1, approve renewal of DocuSign contract. 6.2 has been pulled. 6.3 has been pulled to the next agenda. 6.4, approve State of Minnesota fiscal year 2023 to 2024 agreement to provide funding for treatment court. 6.5, approve temporary on-sale liquor license Ridgeway Volunteer Fire Department. 6.6, award bid for CASA 17 and CASA 21, bituminous mill and overlay project. 6.7 has been pulled. 6.8, approve donations received for April 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2023. And 6.9, confirm payment of disbursements.
Move to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Ward has moved. Commissioner Vagley has seconded approval of the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
If anyone's opposed, say nay. Consent agenda passes. We move on to general business. Item 7.1 is to potentially approve two commissioners to serve on the August 11th, 2023 Special General Election Canvass Board.
Again, since obviously none of you are on the ballot, there's no restriction as to who it is. It will be at 9 a.m. I don't think I had that in there at that time. I wanted to verify with the city folks that are required to be there. So 9 a.m. does work for all of them. So that is what we intend.
And that is on the 11th,
The
Friday?
11th, correct.
Friday, the 11th of August.
Correct.
Madam Chair, I'm not available. I have an MCIT board meeting that.
I could do it.
Okay.
As one of the two.
Okay, 9 you said.
9 a.m. Yes.
I could do it.
Okay. Thank you.
The election's on Tuesday, the 8th, and then this is Friday, the 11th.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. We would need, I think, a motion to make this happen.
I'll move to appoint Commissioners Meyer and Vagley to serve on the Special General Election Canvass Board.
Second.
I'm going to give it to Commissioner Olson. Okay, Commissioner Vagley has moved. Commissioner Olson has seconded the appointment of Commissioner Vagley and myself, Commissioner Meyer, to the Canvas Board. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
If anyone's opposed, say nay. Motion has carried. Next item is 7.2, to receive a presentation from the Minnesota County Intergovernmental Trust.
Good evening. Thank you for the time, Commissioners. My name is Garrett Claybaugh. I'm Executive Director of the Minnesota County's Intergovernmental Trust, MCIT. Commissioner Ward mentioned that earlier, and as you undoubtedly know, she serves on our board. So appreciate her involvement with our group. Appreciate the time, and I'll get right to it. I've got copies. I know you have electronic copies, but if you'd like a hard copy, I can certainly circulate those around. I think I'm going to lose my papers here, so. Yep.
It happened anyway.
Okay, thank you. Sometimes it's easier to read off a paper than the screen.
Except when the printing is tiny.
Oh my God.
True. As you know, the work that we do, you can probably think of as insurance, but we really think of ourselves as a risk pool. We are a risk pool, and I want to talk a little bit about the difference between insurance and a risk pool before I go through the handout. There's a number of differences between the work that we do on your behalf and an insurance company, insurance organization. For starters, we're a governmental organization like you are. We were created in 1979 by county governments, 25 county governments in Minnesota as a result of challenges in the workers' compensation market for county employees. Insurers were pulling out of that market. And so there were a group of 25 counties who got together and created the structure for what is now MCIT. So we've been around for 43, 44 years, all of that time, and our membership has expanded to include 81 counties and 400 other affiliated organizations with county government. So we operate under the authority of Minnesota statute and are a partner of yours as a result of that. Our board, as Commissioner Ward mentioned, is a board of your peers. So we're a board made up of county officials, currently 6 commissioners, 2 auditors, and county administrators. So people who are in your work, who understand that work day to day, who represent and lead the organization from a governing standpoint. Because we're a government entity, we're also not for profit. So we're not generating additional resources to pay sales commissions or stockholders fees back. In fact, when there's excess reserves on our books, the board has been very diligent over 30 or so years to return that excess to counties and to our members. If we're retaining more than we need to for those long-term obligations, then the board has been very willing to do that and has done that consistently over time. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those numbers here. We're fiscally sound and pretty conservative in the approach that we take. So that's all good. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time just to talk about those differences between what the work that we do and insurance. So let me just walk through the handout quickly, and I won't read this to you, but I want to hit a few of the highlights along the way. And at risk of losing all of my papers, I'm going to close that. So let's start with page 2. Inside the cover, the cyber coverage box, that blue box. About a year ago at this time, we were notified by our insurer, Hartford Steam Boiler, that they were canceling our coverage, which means they were canceling your coverage and all the coverage of our members as it relates to cybersecurity. So that was a big risk for us to take. And we had about 6 months to put a program together. That decision that Hartford Steam Boiler made would have been effective January 1, 23, so just this past January. But our staff, guided by the board, was able to come together and put together a way to fill that gap and really do it, I think, in a way that's more sufficient. It's a better set of coverages that we have for you today than were available under the Hartford Steam Boiler plan. So appreciate the board's diligence in working through that process, and our staff did a really great job of putting together a solution under duress. And that's a topic I'll talk about a little bit, because cybersecurity continues to be an area of real keen interest on our part. And it's just, there's a lot of bad guys out there that would like to divert government money into their own checking accounts. And so you can't be diligent enough in that work area, and I will touch on that a little bit later. If you look at the gold box on the bottom left-hand corner of page 2, you'll see dividends. And I mentioned at the outset that MCIT and the board has been very diligent about ensuring that we have enough money to cover those long-term obligations. Our actuary comes to the board every year and provides an estimate of what those long-term obligations are. And I think you'll appreciate this in workers' compensation, for example. Those long-term obligations run the life of individuals. So some young employee who's injured could have a long-term injury that lasts decades, and we would be obligated on your behalf to continue to be funded to pay out the restitution for that over the long run. So that actuarial analysis actually runs 70 years. So that's the horizon that we're looking, and we're setting monies aside for that. But when the actuary also tells us that there's resources available in excess of meeting those obligations, then the actuary and the board have made decisions to return that. And so you'll see here in the gold box, and these are 2022 numbers. So from last year, there was a $7 million dividend that was awarded. And you'll see Winona County's portion of that last year. This year in 2023, the board just decided to return $4 million back to members. Both of those amounts come completely out of the workers' compensation side of the work that we do. The property casualty side has been interesting. While we're very sound, very fiscally prudent in the approach that we've taken, like you, as you build roads and buildings and repair, what we've experienced with property insurance particularly is labor shortages, supply shortages, inflation, really running rampant during this time. So when we have automobile repairs, when we have repairs on buildings. And we've seen more catastrophic losses as well in the recent few years as a result of weather in particular. The board's decided to set aside those dollars and be a little more conservative in its approach to reserving funds for property casualty. And so in that particular venue, haven't returned dividends last year, nor will they this year, but that's no indication that there's anything to be concerned about. Again, we're very fiscally prudent. On page 3, the graphics, you have high and low, top and bottom on that page. The top set of graphs are workers' compensation experience, and these are 5 years worth of data combined from 2018 through 2022. Frequency just refers to the number of claims that we have. So regardless of the amount of money that we pay, these are just claim counts. And severity then includes the total dollars that were paid out over time. And so these are the top 3 claims for workers' compensation by county department, for example. And so you'll see sheriff and jail operations are at the top there. And again, I think it makes complete sense. Those are individuals working in high consequence jobs. They're out all hours of the day and night dealing with various difficult situations, and oftentimes will get injured on the job. And so from a severity and a frequency standpoint, we see a lot of that in our workers' compensation area. Similarly for highway, these are your employees who are on the roads during times of the year when the weather is not exactly as it is today, and they're doing critical public service work, putting themselves often in harm's way. And so, again, it's not surprising that would be the second highest category. And the bottom section is the same types of information just for property and casualty. So property and casualty includes things like buildings. We have $7.5 billion in total insured value across the state of Minnesota in buildings. So that includes this facility that we're in, as well as for fairgrounds and historical societies and other properties like that, but also automobile insurance. Liability coverage as well. So just a whole variety of coverages in that property casualty bucket. And again, as you look here on the graphic between frequency and severity, you'll see auto, perhaps again, not surprisingly, is our number 1 category, just in counting the number of claims, but also in the payout. And particularly, again, as I mentioned at the outset, with inflation recently, that's been a cost driver. But we just have a lot of vehicles in our insured pool, 11,000 vehicles statewide in our pool. And many of those happen to be in the sheriff's offices, but certainly in other offices as well. Second highest category there is property. And again, here you'll see a little bit of a distinction between that and auto, because not surprising that a few property claims can result in high dollars paid out. If this building that we're in today was destroyed, for example, one claim could be worth many millions of dollars. And so that kind of explains why the counts are low on property, the dollar values are also very high. The gold bar on the right side of page 3 there is just a little bit of information about how we calculate contribution rates for you and for our members to the workers' compensation program. One factor that we look at is what we call a mod factor. And in short, what that reflects is your expected injuries versus what you actually would have. And so for the pool as a whole, the mod factor is 1.0. And if you're doing better than the pool, then your mod rate is a little lower than that, a little lower than 1. And if you're having challenges and there are opportunities for improvement, that mod rate is a little higher than 1. And you'll see yours is at 0.38. So congratulations, you all are doing great work in that area. Which really leads me to page 4, and just I'll conclude on this. We're very anxious in our office to provide support services to you and your staff in the areas of safety, prevention. Our interests are aligned with your interests. You know, we're not an insurance organization, so we're not turning monies back to investors or stockholders. Really, our interests are your interests, and we want to see, and I think you want to see, reductions in claims, both severity as well as the frequency of those claims. And so we're positioned to help with that. So consultation is one thing that we do. We've got a small group of staff that can come out and visit with your staff to try to provide some services relative to strategies to improve safety in your areas. The top right-hand picture talks about awareness and prevention materials. We just launched our new website about a month and a half ago, and it's very deep, a lot of resources on that website, and I think they're better organized today than they were before. In the picture on that item, there's a picture of there's a white document there. That's a cybersecurity self-assessment. As I visited with county commissioners a year ago, traveling around the state, I left a copy of that cybersecurity self-assessment with commissioners and encouraged you really to come back and use that in discussions with your administrators, your IT managers, not as a way to make you experts in the IT area, but just as a way to open a conversation. And I think my experience has been our IT staff are very, very anxious to have that conversation. What are we seeing? What are we experiencing? What are the challenges that we have? And that cyber assessment, self-assessment is a great tool to use just to open that conversation, to give you a level of awareness of what challenges are there. So that's just one example of some of the resources that are available on the website. The last two boxes here just focus on trainings. We're doing a lot of trainings on the web, in person. We've got videos now that we've posted post-pandemic to try to make training a little more accessible, freely available. I know it's a couple-hour drive to St. Paul, a little further to St. Cloud for your staff, where we typically have training sessions. And so if you can do that on the web, either live in a hybrid kind of a situation or in a video pre-recorded, it saves some time, some productivity, and avoids those additional costs of travel. So we're trying to do some different things in that way to be a little more sensitive to the needs of just-in-time training as well. So we're here to help. I think as a takeaway here, I would just like to just reemphasize the idea that we're aligned with your interests, and so we're here to help. And thank you again for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Appreciate Commissioner Ward's service on our board, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for coming down today, and thank you to Commissioner Ward. I want to say it as well for serving on this board. This is an important body. My only comment is, a couple of weeks ago, I took a jail tour with the jail administrator. It lasted almost 3 hours, and the number of times that he said, MPIT said do this, MCI said don't do that, etc. I appreciate how much your staff consults with our staff to try to, as much as possible, to anticipate problems and reduce liability, because in a jail, it's liability. Yes, exactly. So I appreciate how much your staff does, because he said a number of times, to your credit and to his credit, how much they talked with each other to try to, as much as possible, reduce liability.
Great. That's great feedback. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, we put an emphasis on jails because
Yes.
a lot of claims and very expensive.
Very
claims.
expensive claims.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we had a hailstorm the other day, but I think it missed. One of our biggest claims a couple of years ago was Dodge County. I think every vehicle they owned was hit by hail. They had a huge hail, and buildings.
Yeah,
And so every time it hails, get those county vehicles protected.
exactly.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, I was going to say, to Garrett's credit, part of what we do too is invest the monies we collect, and everybody knows investments have been down, down. So there's a lot of loss just because of the market, but it seems to be coming around. We've got some good advisors trying to do some things with our money to make that grow, because that's a big part of having to return dividends,
Absolutely.
is making our money grow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy your drive back.
Yeah.
Beautiful evening.
Our next presentation is on the legislative update from the Minnesota Minnesota Inter-County Association.
Very close.
Good evening, Chair Meyer and commissioners. Happy to be here. My name is Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Inter-County Association. I always remind that I'm from these parts originally, where I grew up, down in southeastern part of the state, beautiful part of the state. And so it's always a great pleasure to get down here. I'm here with Steve and Nancy tonight to give you an annual update. Carly's not able to be with us. We have a PowerPoint slide that we handed out, and I'll just say at the front end, excuse me, I'll say at the front end, I hope my voice stays with me the whole evening, but
You need water? got
we,
water.
we have close to 100-page summary just on items impacting county governments from this legislative session. So as Bob was alluding to earlier in his presentation, suffice it to say, if the 2022 session ended with less action than was desirable on some county items, the 2023 session could best be characterized as nonstop action for those of us who work in the Capitol. And I think for county governments in particular, whether you like everything that happened in the legislative session or not, for county governments in particular and the many, many, many state programs that we implement on behalf of state government, often that are not fully or adequately funded, this was a significant progress in terms of increased state funding for those state mandates and support for the work that county governments do. So I will jump into it and go to the next slide. We have this first slide that I have here just highlights at the state general fund perspective. It gives you a sense of the lay of the land as to where things started, ended, where they'll likely begin next legislative session. $17.5 billion surplus for 24-25 in the general fund. Most of that, $12 billion, carried forward from 2022 session, ending without a number of bills being passed. There were significant increases in revenues as well as reductions in revenues within the general fund, and as well as some outside the general fund that we'll talk about later. On net, general fund revenues, taxes were reduced by just under $2 billion for the coming biennium 24-25, and spending was increased by $14 billion, or about 25%. And what you hear me talk most about in my next slide is that of that spending increase, close to $1 billion was a property tax relief package, which reflects as state spending, property tax relief at the local level. And that is by far the biggest property tax relief package that we've seen from the state in quite some time. I'll highlight just one number down at the middle, at the bottom on the budgetary balance line. The session ended with a positive balance of $1.566 billion. So after all of this, the state left the session with north of $1.5 billion in addition to reserves on the bottom line, which bodes well if that all holds. And so far it's more than holding. There's actually collections have been exceeding forecast. Bodes well for a bonding bill this next session. So if we go to the next slide, let me talk about some of that property tax relief. Again, just starting with, and then I'll give you the numbers for Winona County as well, but on a statewide basis, county program aid was increased by $80 million. This is the single biggest increase in county program aid in 1 year that we've seen. So beginning next calendar year, county program aid will increase by $80 million. That is ongoing permanent increase to county program aid. Public safety aid, one-time funding of $300 million, $90 million of which goes to counties and tribes. About 88 million of that goes to counties. That is one-time money. Local housing aid. The legislature created a new local housing aid program. This is a permanent, ongoing annual amount of money that is put in $15.3 million a year for the first 2 years, and then it does drop down to $6.8 million a year after that for counties. But it is the first time ever that there's going to be ongoing money for counties and cities across the state to plan for your local housing infrastructure program needs, whether that be money and support you put into rental housing or into home ownership housing through your local efforts. Soil and water conservation districts, $15 million a year each year in 23 and 24, and then $12 million ongoing after that. I will say that this also addresses a long-term conversation that had been going on, that SWCD's got their operating or administrative money on a year-by-year basis from the Clean Water Fund. This now gives a permanent funding source from the state general fund, and those clean water monies, many also might flow to soil and water conservation districts still, as well as other needs. Then in the middle of the page, a significant amount of that $973 million will be going to direct property tax relief to homeowners and renters, which is the other three legs of the stool, if you will, that we talk to the legislature about all the time. One is general purpose aids like CPA. One is tax-based shifting, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And the other is these direct property tax relief. So in 2023 only, homeowners and renters will both receive a 20.57% increase in the refund that they would otherwise receive under current law for taxes paid in 2022. So that'll just be for 1 year. It'll be, you'll file your normal refund, and that refund will be bumped up by 20.57%. Then those are the income-based refunds. Then on the next line, the increased targeted homeowner refund. This is the non-income-based program. So this is for any homeowner whose property taxes goes up by more than 6% from 2022 to 2023 will be eligible for a refund of the taxes paid above that 6% increase up to a maximum refund of $2,500. Both the $2,500 is an increase from the normal current law program of $1,000, and then the 6% is a lower threshold than the current law program of 12%, and those changes are just for 1 year. Both the renter and homeowner refund programs were also beefed up on a permanent ongoing basis. The renter's refund mostly by the fact that it's moved over to refundable income tax credit. So renters will no longer file two forms. They'll file an income tax form and the renter's credit will come on that form. Then the expanded market value exclusion. I know that was referenced earlier in the meeting. This is a significant change. The market value exclusion had been static since 2011 when it was first put in place with a maximum exclusion equal to 40% of the first $76,000 in home value. That is now 40% of the first $95,000 in home value, and then it begins phasing down after that $95,000. So whereas the current law exclusion phased out around $315,000, the new exclusion will phase out at around $505,000. The numbers are in our 100-page summary directly. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. Expanded senior deferral program, $125 million one time for broadband grants, including $20 million set aside for low density areas. And that allows a 75% cost share of the grants and then a maximum grant size. That is some of the changes. There were other tax-based changes in the property tax relief package. I would point out that there were other provisions. So in particular for Winona County, the bill, after some back and forth between the House and the Senate on local option sales taxes, did include the authorization of the local option sales tax at a $0.25 for Winona County as well, which we were glad to see. So if we go to the next slide, it just gives you a quick highlight of where some of these numbers land for Winona County itself. County program aid, $920,000 annually ongoing. Public safety aid, $838,000 one time. Local housing aid, $132,000 annually. Soil and water conservation aid, that $165,000 will decline a little bit after 2 years, but that will be ongoing. And then SCORE grants, which we'll talk about again a little bit later, was also in the tax bill, will be up about 20%, and that will be ongoing also. There was a slight reduction in homeless prevention aid due to an adjustment to including tribal governments in that aid, and that is carved out of the money for counties. So there was a little bit of an adjustment there. We'll talk, if you have any questions for me now on taxes, otherwise I'll come back up at the end to talk about some of the other items that I try to touch base on, and we'll talk about transportation next, which had a lot going on.
Matt, I'm sorry, just there's a lot of property tax. So is there a, how to fill out the forms 101? I mean, is the public being educated what they're eligible for and how do they do that? I mean, I think public education is so important.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of that in the case of the refund programs would come, the Department of Revenue administers all of those programs as well as the senior deferral program. So that educational information will come from them. I think interestingly and wisely, the legislature also actually put in some money that I didn't highlight in this bill to help the department, well, specifically for the department and requiring them to do some new and innovative marketing around making sure people are aware of the refund opportunities.
So that will be coming.
Yes.
Okay, all right. We'll look forward to that then.
We
Thank you.
we could always ask
I
the
think we should,
recorder to
yes.
do an article for
Yeah. I think it's important that people know that these things are available.
I just add to that,
Yeah.
Madam Chair. That we were surprised the Department of Revenue is sending the rebates from the state out. And they're assembling the mailing list. So at the end of the year, if you don't have one, you need to contact them. But that is a change. Always before you had to do the submission.
Yeah.
So that's a start. And I also want to mention, I have another commitment that we work very closely with this group and they are outstanding in the legislature. I've worked with them for quite a number of years and get the weekly reports from them along with several others, and there's none that compares. So I appreciate this chance to just share that with you. It helps the information I bring to you as often as we go over things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Problem. Nice to be in Winona County. Steve Novak, I handle transportation for MICA. We had a very, very big year, as I think you know by now, in transportation funding. By far and away the biggest one since I've been doing this the last 12 years. And we got off to a good start in January when the legislature passed an individual bill producing and setting aside $316 million as a significant part of what would be the state's 20% match for what is several billion dollars coming from the federal government into the state for fixing roads, bridges, and other transportation-related matters. Just to quickly hit an outline of the detail I'll give you over the next few minutes. Over the course of the session, there are three major bills that passed for transportation. There was the transportation budget bill, which had a target of $1 billion, by far and away the largest target transportation's had in recent memory. A capital bonding bill, which included 1.1 billion in cash, 1.5 billion in bonds, also a record for the size of the bonding bill. And then a $599 million bill for trunk highway bonds over 3 years. Adding that up, we'll see over the next 4 years, 3.8 billion in ongoing dedicated revenue for transportation. What I'd like to do before I give you the details on those three components is also take you quickly through what was sort of an amazing series of events after better than a decade of discussing the need for future and ongoing transportation revenues. 5 different items were passed that significantly add to, on an ongoing basis, revenues for transportation in Minnesota over the next several years. The first item was an increase in the registration fees. That was an area where there was agreement from the House and the Senate almost in the beginning, and it will produce $240 million in fiscal year 24-25 on an ongoing basis. The second item was MVEST was increased to 6.875%, and that will produce an additional $40 million. The surprise of the session, I think, was an increase in the gas tax by indexing the current tax, capping the increase at 3%. Results in the equivalent of a 5-cent gas tax and will produce $155 million in fiscal year 24-25. The fourth item was something called a delivery fee. There was a lot of work done on this from the start of the session to the end, but the way it ended up, there'll be a 50-cent fee on any package delivered that has a value of $100 or more, and that will produce $60 million beginning in fiscal year 25. And then the last one is the sales tax on auto parts, something we've had in place since 2017, but only at a 50% of the total transfer. This bill transfers 100% of the money, but over a 10-year period of time, which will produce $26 million in the first year. But by the time the 10-year transfer is completed, it will produce an additional $200 million annually. Significant new money. Adding it all up, $700 million a year for transportation funding on an ongoing basis going forward. Just as a point of reference, 10 years ago, there was a major study done on what it would take to bring Minnesota's highway and bridge system up to speed. And the recommendation was $600 million a year in new money over a decade. We made no progress essentially until this year. And in this year, they produced the total amount. So it's a significant action that they took. Now, let me just briefly tell you the details of the three major components. The omnibus transportation budget bill, the $1 billion. Interestingly, $850 million of it goes to 7 places, and here's where they go. There's a transfer to the trunk highway fund of $152.65 million. There's an additional $216 million in matching money for the federal IIJA, bringing that total to over $500 million, so that the state has on the table now the entire amount of money they need to match all of the possible federal money that can come into Minnesota for roads and bridges in the next 4 years. And that is a number that is right around $3 billion. $194 million for the NLX rail line from Minneapolis to Duluth. You may or may not support that project, but this amount of state money will also match with federal money and pretty much guarantee that, for better or for worse, this line is going to run. An additional $36 million for county roads and bridges, $50 million for the Blue Line LRT, an additional $40 million for Greater Minnesota Transit, and $131.8 million for what they call named projects, which is another way of saying earmarks.
I apologize. You said for counties? What was counties getting out of that, Steve?
Let's see here. There's an additional $36 million for local roads and bridges, county roads and bridges.
Additional $36 million for how many miles?
Well, I'm going to get into the rest of this when we get to the bonding
It sounds
bill.
like a lot of money, but when yeah.
This is the small number, the larger number's coming.
Okay.
So that takes me to number 2, the trunk highway bonds. I mentioned earlier $599.2 million total for trunk highway bonds. That money was spent in 4 different areas. MnDOT facilities received $87.4 million around the state. There's an additional $153 million for the Corridors of Commerce program. I think program everybody's gotten pretty familiar with. An additional $200 million for state road construction, and then $166.15 million for, again, named projects, earmarks, all around the state. That totals $599.2 million. That brings us to the third major component, which was the bonding bill that I said earlier included $1.1 billion in cash, $2.5 million in GO bonds. And for our purposes here in transportation, roughly 500 million of that total, because that bonding bill does all sorts of things for higher education and numbers of other areas, but just under $500 million in additional money. And it breaks out this way. The local roads receive $78.95 million in undesignated money, and then an additional $146.42 million in named road projects, for a total of $243 million. Micah's transportation platform called for $250 million, which was a large number. And basically what they passed met that goal. First time that's ever happened. So we're very, very happy about that. The second component that went with that was bridges. And $108 million was the starting point for the bridges. That was the governor's recommendation, 105 million. They exceeded it. 67 million of it is undesignated money for local bridges. And then in addition to that, 41.9 million for named bridge projects around the state. The total was 126 million. And again, that met the marker and we're very, very happy about that. Let me just finally list a few other transportation components that were in the bonding bill. Highway, railroad, grade crossings received $3.6 million. Port development, like you have here in Winona, 18.09 million. Safe routes to school, 2.4 million. Active transportation, 1.2 million. Minnesota rail service improvements, 9.6 million, and an additional $3 million for Greater Minnesota Transit. So I think by any measurement, a significant, really a record year for transportation funding in Minnesota. And as importantly, it's loaded with money going forward into the foreseeable future. And we've covered all the state earmarks for what is a substantial amount of federal money that passed a year ago and is now being implemented. The final thing I want to say, Madam Chair, members of your board, you know the quality of your county engineer because you work with them all the time, Dave Kramer, but we work with them in our organization too, at the least on a monthly basis. And of course, I work the legislature every day that it's open. And many times Dave has been called on to testify down there. He's widely respected. We enjoy working with him. He really helps us develop our platform and make sure you're represented as we do. And so it's just been a delight to work with him over the years. And with that, I will conclude and be happy to answer any questions.
Well, the one thing I will tell you is when I spoke to Dave about the additional transportation funding, and on page 6, you show how ultimately by 2027, the funding we get for CASA Highway is an increase of 13%.
Yeah, there'll be a range of 9 to 13% over the next 4 years.
But what he said was, coming out of the pandemic, our actual costs are up about 30%. So I know you've done a fabulous job, and I have listened to you for since I've been in office, and every year you hope for more and don't get it. And this year you got a lot. So I'm grateful for that, but keep getting it, get more.
Got the message.
Want to double check what you said. You mentioned, was it Micah had a goal or the legislature had a goal of like what it'd take to meet the projected needs over a decade, 600 million. So did we finally equal what it should have been for 10 years? Or did this year equal what 10 years? Did they do in 1 year what they would have hoped to do in 10 years?
Well, basically what the result of that report was, which was commissioned by then Governor Dayton, was to bring the highway system back, because with all of the political fighting over gas tax in the last 2 decades, it turns out that between 1988 and 2008 and now 2023, the legislature, for whatever combination of reasons, has only raised the gas tax once.
Yes.
And of course, historically, that's been the main financial engine for developing a competent, coordinated transportation road and bridge program around the state. We're the 12th largest state by population, but we have the 5th largest highway and bridge system of the 50 states. Plus, we have to do it in this kind of weather. So, it's a major challenge for MnDOT and the counties and in the cities of the state. So I was just pointing out that the politics of the last 2 decades has made progress very difficult in that area. And this year, for a combination of reasons, there was a major breakthrough.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Thank you.
So you had a next slide for Winona County. Does that come up? So is that telling me in 2024, I'm going to get about $344,000 additional? Yeah, that slide.
Yeah. Over the next 4 years, on average, it'll be between 9 and 13% a year increase.
Okay, all right. And so just, and again, we always have to put it in perspective because the
Yep.
most calls I get as a rural county commissioner is, why aren't you fixing my road? It's the
Yep.
worst road in the county. So tonight, we just approved a very small project, actually 2.89 miles. And I told Commissioner Vagley, because we had one where we did concrete and that was over $2 million a mile to do concrete project with federal money last meeting. I reiterate, this is basically like putting peanut butter, replacing the peanut butter on the bread. This little project, because you're just replacing 2 inches of stuff. This is over $200,000 a mile. So I need the public to understand, yes, there's a lot of money going into transportation, but unfortunately, as Commissioner Meyer said, our costs are up, 25, 30%, and $344,000 does a mile and a half or something, it just isn't comparable. So, I mean, it's a great job, but I can't get too excited about it all because I still can't fix all the roads that need repair in Winona County. And I live on one of those. And I live on a dead end township gravel road that I feel blessed we got gravel this spring,
Thank you.
Quite well taken.
No,
Thank
it was
you.
a good job, but again,
Thank
it's, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Steve.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Nancy Selesky, and I do both Public Health and Human Services for MICA, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I will start with Health and Human Services. Again, a lot went into that area as well. There were 2 bills, one dealing with human services specifically, and then the other dealing with health and human services. And I'll start with the first, was the Human Services Omnibus. That bill, they provided $1.35 billion in new spending to DHS in the first biennium and 1.56 in the second. Included in this is something that we've been working on as counties for a very, very long time, and that relates to the county cost share for a certain population that is at the Anoka Metropolitan Regional Treatment Center, AMRTC, and is awaiting a bed at another state-operated facility. In this example, it's St. Peter. Counties have no ability to effectuate those transfers. They are state operated to state operated, and yet we pay 100% of the freight for those folks who are deemed to not need the level of hospitalization that AMRTC provides. To put it in context, counties paid, I think last year, $21 million in do not meet medical criteria days. And those dollars go into the general fund. They don't go into the system, into the mental health system where those dollars are so needed. Again, we've been talking about it for a long time. We decided this is the time to take a certain portion of the folks that were there, and that was those that are civilly committed as mentally ill and dangerous. And I'm pleased to tell you that we have a 2-year reprieve, saving counties $13.2 million, again, for just that smaller population, the MIND, waiting for a bed at St. Peter over the next 2 years. So that was something that we were pleased with. Tied to that is the 48-hour rule. Several years ago, the legislature passed legislation that says that folks that are languishing in our jails that are having mental health issues need to get into AMRTC in this case. And they passed what was called the 48-hour rule, which means you have to get placed by then. So those folks were jumping to the top, if you will, in some cases. So the county attorneys and the sheriffs this year brought legislation because the state has been not in compliance with that 48-hour rule in several cases. I think Attorney General Ellison said that he is working on 16 different cases where he's defending the state on that. So to that end, they put together this 48-hour task force. There will be 2 county representatives, 1 county commissioner and 1 human services director. And the idea is to come back to the legislature in February of next year. So pretty quick turnaround with resources, what to do about this. So this is something, again, we as counties are struggling with, as is the state, frankly. We just don't have the resources. Included also in this human services bill, the omnibus bill, as you can see, were rate increases for a variety of direct service professionals or providers. Everything from day services to day support, certain waiver services, home care services. and non-emergency medical transportation services and ambulance services. These are things that have been, needed to have happen over many, many years. And so pleased to say that they did put some money into that this time. The second bill that I would mention is the Omnibus Health and Human Services Bill. And that bill, they appropriated $1.4 billion. Next slide, I'm sorry. There we go. $1.4 billion in new DHS spending in the first biennium and $1.5 billion in 26-27. In addition, the Department of Health spending was increased by $283 million in the first biennium, $233 million in the second, 26-27. I want to mention that there are two new state agencies that we're going to be dealing with. One deals with families. It's the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And then a second, Department of Direct Care and Treatment. And the idea is to take existing resources, the employees, as well as the dollars in existing agencies, including the Department of Human Services, Department of Health, Department of Education, and Public Safety, and put these resources into these two new agencies. Two new to see how this is going to work out. We've had some meetings with some of the staff, and they're working through this. This is more to come on this in the next year or two. So just want to mention we'll be dealing with two new agencies. The legislature also heavily invested in IT. This is something, again, we've been working on for a long time. $135 million was invested. They put money into service delivery transformation, $41 million in the first biennium. And then they put money into integrated services for children and families. Something real important to counties is improving the METS functionality. That was $30 million in 24-25. This is something that your county workers are wrestling with every day. We're hopeful that the screen technology that people are still working with will become a thing of the past at some point here. They also put money into the MMIS modernization and MNsure technology modernization. Next slide. In terms of behavioral health, they also made pretty significant investments, $4 million in seed money for the 988 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Again, that seed money that the state provided going forward, it's going to shift to a telecommunication fee. So everybody that has a cell phone is going to see a small fee on their phones to keep that lifeline going. They put significant or additional money into mobile crisis grants. They established funding for tribal mobile crisis response teams. School-linked behavioral health grants received an increase, and first episode psychosis. They also provided a grant to the Center for Rural Behavioral Health, which is housed at MSU in Mankato, provided a rate increase for mental health services. And then I want to mention the bonding bill. The last several bonding cycles, every time that there's been a bill, I realize that they're not every year, but there has been an investment of $10 million that's going toward behavioral health crisis facilities for the last several bonding periods. In terms of childcare, they provided additional basic sliding fee assistance of $30 million per biennium. They funded the Family First Prevention program at $25 million. And they increased, in terms of economic supports, they increased the general assistance benefit. And that's the first time in a very, very long time since there's been an increase there. And they did put significant money into food security as well. Next slide. Sorry, I'm part of that 100-page summary. They did put money into public health, which I know is near and dear to a number of you. $25 million into emergency preparedness. They created a public health response contingency account of $2.5 million. So that is sitting there in the event that something should come up that we do not yet know about. Also they put money into the public health system transformation, Healthy Beginnings, Healthy Grants program. They provided money for lead remediation in both schools and childcare centers. And they also put money into the AmeriCorps Heading Home program of $1.66 million in 24 and the same in fiscal year 25. And this is for people that are facing housing challenges. Other miscellaneous, I would just mention, making our clients as well as the workers' life a little bit easier is there will now be continuous eligibility, Medicaid eligibility for children. MA copays are eliminated effective January of next year. There'll be no cost share for folks that are on medical assistance. And there was an increase to the MFIP housing benefit COLA. Something that was discussed that is going to be studied over the interim is healthcare affordability. At one time, there was a proposal to look at moving managed care out of the Medicaid program, looking at the public option, things like that, universal health care. In the end, there is a study that's being conducted where they'll come back to the legislature with some findings next year. Finally, I would just mention early in session in March, actually, they passed a bill early. There were a number of bills that were signed into law this year, which was good. And that was $36 million to counties to help unwind the public health emergency. As you know, COVID-19 created a lot of problems, and there were the applications for medical assistance were not reviewed during that period of time. So there are 1.5 million applications or recertifications that have to be done now. And they did provide counties with $36 million to help fast track that. In addition, they gave money to the Department of Human Services and MNsure relative to that unwinding. Finally, I just want to mention also that your staff, I work closely with Karen Zanis, and she's always at all of our MICA monthly meetings, easy to work with. She's always a phone call away and is an asset to not only you and MICA, but counties on a statewide basis. So just want to make sure that I mention her. And with that, I'd try to answer questions.
Oh, well, if you can, under the bonding, the 10 million for behavioral health crisis facilities, do you know what part of the state is going to this year?
Yeah, I'm not, hang on
They did. Rochester did, and it opened last summer.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, there was $10 million, and there's two pieces that are being taken out of there. I don't know that we have that broken down, but it's going to backfill a partial project that Dakota County had, and another one in St. Louis County is part of that $10 million. And then there's not a lot of additional money, I would say, but I think it's like 2 million, something like that, that's left. But hopeful that this $10 million for each bonding bill continues so that can continue to get built out.
Commissioner Bagley?
No, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Ward, then go ahead.
Yeah, Nancy, the two new state agencies doesn't give me a lot of, there are going to be two new commissioners, political appointees of those two organizations, and yet still have a general health and human service commissioner.
Madam Chair and Commissioner, what could go wrong, right? We've all been thinking this through, and I think what I've gleaned from the discussion is that the DHS now that is all encompassing will really become more Medicaid, focused. Whereas the direct care and treatment that we have been working with, frankly, for so long, we're hopeful that because direct care and treatment has to get in line or in the queue with all of the other DHS projects, that we're hopefully on the same page with the state, that we need resources and that this could be very positive. But mentioning that, you mentioned the commissioner, you mentioned the, bureaucracy. Again, supposedly it's all moving from, one agency to the other, but we will be dealing with two new commissioners. So.
Like, what can go wrong? I know they've been trying to break up that big mega department for years, so let's hope for the best.
Right, and Madam Chair and Commissioner, that's something that counties, want to be at the table as they're doing this, because we have to be able to work with these agencies.
I appreciate all your work over the time that I've been on the MICA board. It's difficult. There's so much bureaucracy, but I really appreciate all your work trying to get us more money. And in particular, I'm very excited about the IT updates. I do hear complaints about that from our staff.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But will it require counties to upgrade considerably with new equipment and programming and those
Well, one
lines are
could
yet to be
hope.
seen? Pardon me?
We want to, we
Well,
want to.
right, but it comes with a price tag to counties
I
too.
know, but
Yeah.
there's efficiencies to be
Yeah.
had.
Well, honestly, when they first told me about the system called Random Moments in Time, I thought they were
Yeah.
pulling my leg.
There are a lot of things that are amazing to me still after all of these years.
Well, we are an IT state. I mean, and we lack and yeah,
We do.
and we have some really good models to follow. All right, let's hope.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Take very good notes. Your job isn't done yet, I'm sure.
Well, Madam Chair and Commissioners, lest you think that's all that was going on. Next slide, and I'll try and be brief in the interest of time. Again, much of this is summarized, and as I've been talking to some of your staff, we continue to be, as we have been through session and are all year, available to help through the implementation phase and answer questions. Community corrections, public safety probation services was a top priority for all 87 counties, has been for a number of years as frankly, the state's participation in probation services spending had dropped to roughly 25% of total costs, even though it really is a state responsibility. So community corrections probation services, a historic increase of $43 million across the three systems. Also, the three systems are now all on one formula. So regardless of whether or not you are a CCA county, a county probation officer model, or in the case of Winona County, where you contract with the Department of Corrections, all of those counties will receive their funding through a universal single formula. The county ask was $56 million. We didn't get exactly that. There are some other things that come along with this, including that supervision fees will be phased out over a number of years. So we're looking to continue to have a conversation with the legislature about making sure that that money, where there's an opportunity to do so, is beefed up a little bit more. There, along with that, will be a community supervision advisory committee that's being put together to also with the intent that the commissioner, in collaboration with counties, will effectuate some more uniformity and standardization and dissemination of best practices across the state in terms of probation services. Armored radio grants, $4 million. I say almost only $4 million. There's probably a couple $100 million need in armored radio grants. I would point out that the public safety one-time monies that were provided in the tax bill are also eligible for that equipment use. There's $70 million one time in community crime and violence prevention grants that counties can seek. And then there's other funding and policy changes. Let me just point out a couple of things quick, as you all ask great questions here, which I truly appreciate because it helps us flesh out issues for you. Also in the transportation bill, it's not relevant to every county, but it is to Winona County. There was also an increase in deputy registrar fees, which is something that we've been supporting for a long time as Real ID and the more complicated transactions have fallen to counties, and the easier transactions with the easy to pay has been falling to the state and online. Increasingly, locally operated registrar offices have not been self-supporting and have been subsidized with property taxes in a way that was not intended. And so there will be some positive adjustment there. If we go to the next slide, again, as Bob had mentioned earlier, now this is one-time money. I talked a little bit about the new ongoing local housing aid program earlier. There was $1 billion of one-time money that was put in to various housing investments. That is the single biggest one-time general fund input into housing for certain that the legislature has ever done, but $350 million for new affordable housing of different types, $200 million for down payment assistance. There's rental assistance. There's support for manufactured home parks. There's money for rehabbing public and subsidized housing. So there's a number of different pieces to that equation. The environment bill, I talked about the 3% increase that was in the tax bill, $3.5 million a year. That's about a 20% increase directly for counties. But there also across the environment bill and a number of other bills was money For example, in the Environment Bill, there was significant money that the Pollution Control Agency will administer for waste prevention and reduction grants, as well as for food rescue grants. The Legacy Bill includes $4.8 million a year for the Ag Best Management Practices Program, which also an eligible use of that money is the Rural Septic System Replacement and Loan Program, which is very important, I know, to a lot of rural areas. There were significant monies related to PFAS contamination planning and cleanup, and $1 million for feedlot related issues and surface sewage systems. So in general government, the local compensation limit was just something that was on Micah's agenda for quite a number of years. We were the only state in the country that had one. That was one thing. So it kind of became a big local control issue. That is now gone. There was an open meeting law exception passed so that up to 3 times per year, public officials can participate from a non-public location. Election law changes and ongoing funding, substantial election law changes that we summarize in the bill. And then what I, instead of labeling other county successes on the next slide, what I say is other county impacts. There was a number of things just for county governments as employers where there are law changes excuse me, that will impact county governments, including a new paid family medical leave law, which will become effective January 1st, 2026, that include a 0.7% assessment on payroll. The Jobs and Labor Bill included a requirement that all employers provide earned sick and safe time up to what is the equivalent of about 6 days per year. Most local governments already do that. Substantial expansion of the Public Employee Labor Relations Act and changes to that law. There was an overhaul of the para duty disability system to do really 2 things. One is there was some change in the benefit structure for and the copays for earnings that individuals who are on duty disability when they have outside earnings over time in terms of recapturing or offsetting some of those earnings, but also, and I think importantly, a new benefit to provide public safety officers and firefighters who experience trauma in the workplace with paid access to paid mental health services, appropriate evidence-based mental health services with the goal of returning to work and into full health. Cannabis legalization obviously will have an impact across the state in all dimensions of our society, but certainly there was some progress that was made. I think some important progress in ensuring that there was some local control maintained in that bill, as well as revenue sharing of the gross premiums tax, 20% of the gross premiums tax that will come back to counties and cities over time. So that is, I'm going to leave it there. I want to thank again, Commissioners Ward and Meyer, and Commissioner Meyer. It may be that several of you were up at the legislature, but I know Commissioner Meyer helped in meeting with some legislators on behalf of Micah's agenda. That is always fantastic for us in order to have your backing, and they see us as talking heads sometimes, and it's great to bring friends along with us so that they know that we have the support of our member counties behind us. Administrator Holte, I want to thank her and Pat Moga and just your whole team here is very helpful to the work we do throughout the year.
So you had said to us, I think at our last board meeting, that this year Micah got 75% of the things that they lobbied for. Is that still true? Which I think is fabulous.
I don't know if I would put a percentage on it, but I would say this. One of the first things we put out within the first 24 hours or so of session was to just quickly take our entire platform, which if this isn't in your packet, and did a little checkbox thing. And you can see, I can actually leave you with this copy and pass it around. You'll see that most, if not all, of the boxes are either checked green, like we fully got them over the finish line, checked yellow, meaning we made great progress, that sort of thing, and some that we didn't get done. But it was a very successful year, not only for Micah, but for county governments, really, and a team effort and a a lot of collaborative relationships and coalitions to make that happen.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We'll let Commissioner Vaguely grade you.
Make the font bigger is one thing. My students would yell at me if I had font that small, both you and BKB. Oh my gosh. Kill it. Sorry. Otherwise, fantastic work.
Right.
Thank you.
So what are you going to do next year?
Well, it's a good
Gonna
question.
Sort all this stuff out? I mean, there's a lot of sorting that needs to be done, yes?
There's a lot of sorting. There may be a little bit of cleanup. To be honest, there's, if for as much as got done, almost all of these bills were chock full of study groups for issues that the legislature still feels are yet to be resolved. And so we're paying attention to them, participating in some of them. We'll be monitoring them. And so, you know, my gut tells me the legislature will want to do what they need to this next session to, they got a lot done. So I think they'll do a little bit of cleanup. They'll focus on a bonding bill and they will get done as soon as they can. That's my estimation.
Again, educate me. So actually, there's nobody up for election. It'll be all
The House
same
is up
place?
every 2 years.
Right, but not this year. That'll be next.
In 2024,
Right.
correct.
So this next session will be all the same players, basically.
All the same players this coming session, correct?
Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
You-
All right, do you want to move on or do you want to break?
Oh, what's the next one?
We're going to talk about the SEMCRA levy next.
I'm okay going on.
Yeah, let's
All right, then.
keep
So
going.
item 7.4 is to discuss and determine the 2024 SEMCRA allocation and approve a preliminary levy resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now,
Good evening.
remember the story we just heard? I think housing got tons of money.
Yep.
Buffy.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Buffy Baranek, Executive Director of SEMCRA, the Southeastern Minnesota Multi-County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Thank you for the opportunity tonight. I'm going to just briefly, just given time and the length of all your presentations, I'll just briefly review our successes and what we're looking at going forward. And I'm going to focus on the $1 billion at the end. I'll bring in some of the answers to some of your questions along the way. So in looking at our operations, I break it into 3 key areas. Section 8, which is rental assistance, rental, properties that we actually own, and then community development. A lot of the rehab work that we do, housing development work. When I think about Section 8, we have about 200 households within Winona County with an average income of about $17,000 that we actually serve. Assistance-wise, they get about $6,000 on average. That's about $1.1 million of federal dollars that come in through the Section 8 program to the county of Winona. There's 2 sister programs that I think of, and that's the Section 8 Home Ownership Program and the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. Both are growing programs, and we're very successful there as well. They're really, truly a step-up program where we're helping people get off of public assistance and be financially self-sufficient. So wonderful, wonderful programs. We're also really proud of our Section 8 program where we are now able to operate without a deficit. We do not levy. That used to be part of the 4-county split, was a subsidy of that program. We no longer levy for that. Second key program at SEMCRA is our rental housing. We operate several different properties across all 4 counties. We do not have public housing. SEMCRA does not have public housing within Winona County. The city of Winona has public housing. So there was a comment made earlier about the publicly owned housing dollars. That would be the city of Winona applying for those through the state to bring that money home. SEMCRA does have public housing in the other 3 counties, and we have been successful in bringing that money down for rehab work there, much needed rehab work. Those 56 rental units that we have within Winona County, the average income there is about $22,500. We do a lot of work with capital. We did some rehab work in our North Stone property located in Rolling Stone this year with windows, siding, a lot of painting and carpeting work done there. And we pay, we're a government entity, but we do pay taxes. We pay about $34,000 a year in property taxes on those 56 units. And then finally, community development. That is really truly on fire at Sumtra. We have 3 open grants within Winona County right now, one in Goodview, Rolling Stone, Altura. It's a joint grant. We've been successful in helping some of our small communities that may not have been competitive alone, but we brought those together. And then St. Charles. All 3 of those grants have single family rehab and rental rehab as well. So we're helping other landlords that have affordable housing rehab their properties as well. That brings in about 1.8 million just in those 3 grants. That's federal dollars administered through deed that comes to Sumtra. The last item that I want to hit on, I'm super happy. I've gotten this question for the last 17 years. When will the South Fork levy end? And tonight I can actually say I can estimate 2025 will be our last request for a levy for the South Fork TIF. That's a housing development located in St. Charles. Once those bonds are paid off, we will not levy. So 25,000 of your levy every year has gone to help pay that for that housing development. All the lots have been sold. I think it was through some ARPA dollars. We had a partnership with Habitat for Humanity. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. When we put that back on the tax rolls, we'll be putting on about somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. So super happy about that. And it will close out early. There was a time when we didn't know if we'd have to actually go to the state legislature and ask for an extension, but we will not have to do that. And then finally, our home buyer education counseling, financial wellness counseling assisted about 80 families during that last grant period. So really happy about that. I'm going to pause there and just ask, are there any questions about current operations or our programs? And then I'll jump into.
If I did, it would be that you talk about the average return on investment for Winona County of the levy is $7.36 or over $728,000 annually. So for every 1,000, which is the levy's been about 1,000. It's been 1,000 ever since.
100,000. 100,000.
100,000 since
Yep.
I've been in
Yep.
office.
We'll go 1,000.
No,
Yep.
100,000. And that the value that we get back is 728,000. And I just wanted to better understand what that meant.
Okay, so what that means is for that $100,000, what revenue do we bring back in? So that would be like the Section 8 dollars, the $1.1 million, the small cities, the $1.8 million there. Any of the subsidy that are on those programs that another entity couldn't bring in. So it's that additional revenue that we bring in because you have an HRA.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. Super.
It's a value add.
Right, and to always reiterate the point, that $100,000 is from outside the city of Winona. It's not the city of Winona is only contributing, I don't know if it was in here, about $1,083 or
The city of Winona, when we took over, so we are the HRA for the county, excluding the city of Winona. There's a separate city of Winona HRA. I'm not directly familiar with what they do or don't do, but we do not levy within the city of Winona. When we took over the Section 8 program, so we can operate in a jurisdiction that we aren't the HRA for by either joint powers or an agreement with that HRA. When we took over the Section 8 program from the city of Winona, they decided they did not want to administer that. Those vouchers actually could have left. Like literally left the city of Winona. If Sumtra hadn't taken those, they could have gone to Rochester, Minneapolis, LA, Dallas, wherever. So, but Sumtra took that over. We administer those vouchers and continue to do so. The city provided us $1,000 in administrative fees. The federal government provides us admin dollars to operate that program. Prior to taking on the city of Winona, we operated about a $30,000 deficit. Now there is not a deficit. There's $7,500, somewhere between $4,200 to $7,500 per year that I don't request for you to pay or the other 3 counties to pay because we took that on. So was it financially advantageous for Sumtra to take on the city of Winona and keep those vouchers here within our region? Absolutely.
But advantageous to the residents that need that housing.
Yes.
That's the big
Yeah.
one. But
Yeah.
But Buffy, you've commented it is a growing concern of the people who use that. You deal a lot with their personal issues, trying to keep them into stable
Yeah.
housing and stable.
That's not part of my request. I would love to add that to my request. Since you have additional funding, maybe we want to consider a support service coordinator to help coordinate. That is, I mean, that's an excellent point. In fact, we just got 2 calls in the last 2 days. A family member calling and saying, I have a member of my family that's mentally ill. I need housing for them. What do I do? I've called social services. I've called, and they keep getting passed around. We need somebody to coordinate services for families. So
But by
it's a lot of-
taking on those extra vouchers, it did create somewhat more of a workload
Yeah.
that the city hasn't felt the need to address.
but Sumstra has.
Yes.
And thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on our current programs? Otherwise, I will move into the levy or a look to the future, which will get us into the $1 billion. So in terms of Section 8, there's a state rental assistance program. Out of that $1 billion, there is a program, and the state are looking to the HRAs to administer that program. That was a really good decision on behalf of the state, because we do not want to lose our federal dollars. There needs to be a balance between those two. There's a lot of work being done. We've hired the HRAs, our state organization has hired a national consultant to come in and help the state actually set that program up. It's been done in other states. The state wants that program to be Section 8 like. I'm sure there will be some differences. We will see how that all pans out. The state is saying they will pay 100% of the admin fees. So when I talk about the option B coming up, that's a state-funded rental assistance program. That's not part of our option B. When we look at our rental housing programs on a go-forward basis, we will be going after some of that money, the publicly owned housing program dollars that are more robust in their funding. It's an existing program that's out there that they're funding now. We'll go after and we'll try to secure some of that additional capital money. The state has set up, so we talked about the $1 billion. There's 16 programs that we're aware of that are being funded, and I have some information that we're aware of and the funding levels of those programs. I don't have all the answers. I can't tell you exactly how all these are going to be, but I can tell you what we're hearing and the meetings that we're having with Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. We believe that the majority of that money is going to flow through Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. They too are looking at maybe adding a commissioner, an assistant commissioner, and we know how all of that pans out. There's many new programs. So we will see when and how this all rolls out. But what we do know is there is $1 billion in funding, and we want to be ready to go after and secure that. That money that's flowing through Minnesota Housing Finance Agency will be competitive. You're going to have to apply for it. The money that's coming directly to cities or counties, and not all cities, it will flow to the city of Winona and it will flow to the county, as you just heard, is that local housing aid. As HRAs, what we are saying and what we are strongly encouraging is that you put that money into a housing trust fund, or you consider that. What we believe and what we're hearing is that local housing aid cannot be used for any of your staff time to administer or do anything. But if you put it into a housing trust fund, there's a limit on how much can be used for admin, and that's 10%. So that can help with some of the administration of those programs. That's, again, personally, we like housing trust funds. We like them because there's local control. You should like them because you have control over those too. They can't be just used to subsidize the Section 8 program, for example, or admin or whatever. They're designated by a county ordinance or a city ordinance on what and how those dollars are spent. The other nice thing is for county and city staff, once it goes into a housing trust fund, what we're hearing is they are considered spent. So that means less reporting and whatnot. So that's all we know today on that. I am certainly not an expert on local housing aid, but we do, because it's housing, we have an interest and an appetite in that, and in making sure those dollars are spent appropriately. So I'm going to go into our levy request. This is slightly different this year because what we've brought forward are two options to all 4 counties. Option A, it's our traditional levy request and I'll talk about the option A first and what's the same components that were in there last year. And then there is an option B, which addresses the $1 billion. It addresses capacity and leverage. If you're going to make an investment into capacity, then we want to increase our ability to bring some of that $1 billion home. So option A, our normal levy increases for $110,000, $140,000. The components remain the same. Like I said, general fund expenditures of $55,640. Existing housing developments of $40,000. That's the $25,000 for the South Fork TIF and $15,000 for Greenview and Parkview apartments or the Lewiston apartment complex. There's a bond deal that was done there. There was a levy pledge. And that's at $15,000. Community stabilization and preservation. That's the money to go after and secure the small cities development programs to do that rehab work. And $4,500 for us to be able to go after the state program money for our existing programs. So $110,000 is the normal levy request. $1 billion came forward. My feeling as an HRA, we need to answer that or give you the option for us to be able to go after that. For us to be able to, I don't have capacity in staff to be able to write the grants. So we would need that. And what we're asking each county for is $40,000 to go after that $1 billion. We're also asking for funding of a housing trust fund. For Winona County, we've asked $50,000. Could be more. It's not a lot of money, but I was afraid if I added another zero to that, maybe I wouldn't even be here tonight. So it's an additional $90,000. So the 110 plus the 90 is $200,140. Any questions on that? I'll pause there.
Yeah, I do. Do you see the additional 90,000 as 1 year? I mean, you're asking for it for 2024, but you wouldn't necessarily expect to get that ongoing in 25, 26.
So honestly and transparently, so why 40,000? I think I need to ask, where did you come up with 40,000, Buffy, from 4 counties for a grant writer? Being a multi-county HRA is difficult. Winona County might say yes, and the other 3 might say no. So I still want to do something for you. If you say yes, I can hire a consultant. That's why 40,000. So let's just say all 4 say yes. Do you really need 160,000 for a grant writer? What I would say is let's roll any excess into the housing trust fund if there's excess, or that money could be used for year 2, because I do believe we're going to need to grant write in 2024 and 2025. So I'm anticipating a 2-year 40,000. Let's just say it was only Winona County playing, I'd ask for $40,000. That's the worst case scenario. In terms of the $50,000 for the housing trust fund, well, I didn't know about local government aid when I wrote this in May, or the local housing aid. So maybe that would come through that avenue. I don't know. I don't know what the county's plans are with that, but 50,000 at least would start it. If we got a nod on this, we could start some of that work to set up a housing trust fund. It takes time. One of the 16 programs is housing trust fund match money. So if you started a housing trust fund, potentially there would be match money coming in from the state for that. Don't know how much. I know people are feverishly around the state setting up housing trust funds.
I am part of another group called Hope for Homes, and we have in fact are working on a housing trust fund, but it would not be held at the county. It would be held at the Winona Community Foundation. So I'm curious about this one and knowing if it's also just for outside of the city of Winona.
If it's funded, yes, thank you. If it's funded through the HRA levy, It would be for outside. If a county housing trust fund is set up and it's funded with the local housing aid, it's the whole county. So this was a conversation we had at Goodhue County. The local housing aid that's coming down could be split between Semshra and the Red Wing HRA. If they, because Red Wing HRA has a housing trust fund as well. So, yeah, so it depends on that source.
If that was true, then it would not necessarily 100% come out of the rural levy. Part of it would potentially come from the entire county. Yeah. Okay.
I want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. So the difference in terms of what a $300,000 taxable taxpayer would pay, it's $8.24 for the $110,000 levy, and it's $14.97. So am I reading it correctly? It would be a $6.73 difference
Correct.
between option A and option B.
Correct, to
A
a
grand
taxpayer.
total of $6, not $6 per month, but $6.73 total.
Total,
Okay.
one-time payment. Well, two if you split your tax payment.
On a
Of
resident-
$3.
Yeah, on a residential property.
Yeah,
Residential.
I know farm values, there'd be a lot more, et cetera. Yeah, but I just want to make sure that I'm reading that correctly. That's,
And just to point out, it's $7.36 now because the levy's only 100,000 and
Yep.
it has been at 100,000 for 10 years.
I'm just going to begin to state my viewpoint or where I'm leaning. This, I think, is an example. If we don't go with option B of being penny wise and pound foolish in terms of a historic, the most money ever invested in housing in Minnesota, we need to have enough staff to go after that. So I think it would be penny wise and pound foolish not to go with option B. I know and the problem is it's just county residents, et cetera. But if county residents, residents pay other ways. I think it would be.
Well, can you set this someplace?
Commissioner Ward. Then.
Well, I've had long heartburn about this funding because it is just the city, just the out of the city. And yet we are doing things for them. And so the city was just here earlier this evening asking for our help with a project. Okay, as a city, they elected not to replace staff to do some of their HRA work. They came to Semshra to do that. And I think maybe I don't know what else they've been not doing because they did not replace staffing. There's a lot of money coming in. Yes. $1 billion sounds like a lot of money, but when you divide it across the state of Minnesota, it's not that much. I'm sorry. Only Goodhue County has gone with a housing trust fund. Wabasha does not, Dodge does not. And we're the 4 players in that. So the other counties haven't felt the need to do that yet. And again, if the city of Winona, which this group does benefit the whole county, but a lot of people who work and shop in the city of Winona, which benefits come from the out county. So for them not to recognize the need, they came to us earlier looking for our help and support. I've mentioned to Buffy ever since we took over Section 8 that we should be asking the city of Winona to step it up. And here's a mixed signal. All this money's coming in, state, federal, and yet I have a feeling that Winona County and almost every county in the state of Minnesota is going to have to raise their levy to function, to capture these dollars. In my opinion, that is just wrong. And so I couldn't support option B, and I'll put a motion on the table just to move this along. I'm sorry, but I have other option C is that we stay at the 100,000, knowing that in a year that 25,000 will come off the St. Charles, so that'll be extra money. And I think we need time to figure out all this stuff from the state and all this stuff that our legislators told us about. I don't think the state's got it figured out yet, to say the least. So I propose set the levy at maintain the $100,000 for Semshra.
Is there a second? I think motion fails for lack of a second. Should we continue discussion?
To attempt to get another option up on the table, I'll make a motion to go with option B, the request option B.
I will second that motion. Um,
Question.
Yes.
You indicated if the other counties do or don't. So if they do or don't, will that be prorated down? Our contribution, the Winona County's contribution?
So the $40,000 would be used just for Winona County. And if the other counties do not participate, I'm going to have to contract out. So it would be used for contract. So let's just say I spent $30,000 on contracting fees. The other 10,000 I would propose would either be carried over to 2025. And then maybe we're asking for only 30,000 that year rather than 40. Or if we spend it all, then it's spent. It's just, we're only going to go after money for Winona County or grants for Winona County if we receive only the 40,000 from Winona.
What kind of projects are you thinking of? Because we're working with basically some very small cities
Mhm.
and very rural areas.
Yep.
So what kind of projects are you thinking you're going to go after with this consultant or whatever?
I'll give you some examples. I've got the 16 different funding sources,
Right.
examples of those.
Thank you.
Again, we don't know all the specifics of these programs yet, but there are specific programs that are targeted just for rural Minnesota. So workforce housing. We're particularly interested in any sort of rehab. Maintaining our housing stock is the lowest, most economical way to save the housing that we do have. So anything that is rehab related, definitely. The other piece to this with a housing trust fund and that funding, it's not just SEMTRA that could utilize that housing trust fund. Other entities could come in and utilize that. And we need all housers applying for these grants. We would be applying for the local housing fund grant match money. Hopefully, we would put 50,000 in and we'd see 50,000 in matched. Again, I think a lot of that's going to depend on how many people are requesting funds there. We know that there's the state-run rental assistance program that's coming. There would be potentially project basing that could happen, which would preserve affordability in not only SEMTRA properties, but other properties, other affordable properties that are out there. There is one, it's on the second page, the Greater Minnesota Housing Infrastructure Program. It's a one-time appropriation, but it's match money going in to pay for the infrastructure for housing development. So that is another avenue that we're very interested in knowing more about. I am involved with Minnesota NARO and will be helping to develop the training and rolling this out to all housing authorities and how we can utilize this funding. So those are just some of the ideas today, Commissioner Ward, that we have on the table. Homebuyer education, down payment assistance, those are all programs that we currently administer. I do think that the funders will be, down payment assistance sounds wonderful and great, but I think when you're actually going after that money, the state's going to fund programs that are already in existence. They're going to want to put their money where there's a proven program. We do have a down payment assistance. We've had that up and running for 4 or 5 years now with Goodhue County Housing Trust Fund. So that would be another program.
I support option B.
And just clarification, when we say option B, that's option A
Plus,
plus the option B.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Has our housing study been completed?
Not completely.
When is that anticipated?
Later this summer. The needs part of it has been done, and there was a presentation at the EDA.
And does that, I apologize, I haven't seen that. Does that break out city of Winona and rural Winona County?
It does, and St. Charles and Lewiston and Goodview all contributed to it.
Correct.
To do the study, yeah.
Yep, to do the
To
study.
do the study.
And then the numbers really talked about the shortage of starter homes That was, I mean, that was one of the big takeaways that I took away. But one of the other facts that has come out recently, which is really only about the city of Winona, but a healthy market has a 5% vacancy rate. Winona has 1% vacancy rate, which makes it very difficult for people who get displaced to find somewhere to go. I mean, not to pick fights, but so for a number of years, we have failed to pay for the full amount of the Senior Advocacy Center, and yet the city of Winona makes up that difference out of their levy money because they see value and because that service serves a number of individuals, and they've given us those numbers, a number of individuals who live outside the city of Winona. And so I would say that to go tit for tat with the city about not paying their fair share, I see as pointless, and I would prefer our city governments to get along. And I would certainly not, I would not single them out and say, oh, it's not, that somehow they haven't paid their fair share out of housing or for the support of the organization of SEMCRA, because they have paid for other things and other services that only go to rural residents or go to rural residents when my levy is in fact contributing towards it. So I do see this in the same way Commissioner Vagley does, of it penny wise, pound foolish. This is once in a lifetime funding. We need housing desperately. And we need housing of all different types. So I think this is a fabulous opportunity. Commissioner Ward.
Would you consider amending, if you want to do this, apply for all this money, you get the 40,000, but hold off on the 50,000, the Housing Trust Fund? Because it's a relatively new concept, I think, especially in Southeast Minnesota. I mean, the other counties that our members haven't felt the need to start that or see the benefits of adding that.
The value is the match, right?
Correct. So I'm a risk mitigator. I don't like risk. And if you're going to invest the 40,000 and we're going to write these grants, one thing that SEMCRA does really well, we're very successful in writing our grants. And it's because we are competitive. And one of the angles there is they're going to be looking for match money. If
We can do a pay for performance type of thing. If you win the grant, come back and we can talk about it then. They just
Well,
give you another 50,000,
right.
I guess. Again,
I mean,
I'm
but
asking my property
Mhm.
taxpayers, my corn and bean fields to pay for this.
what I would be open to is thinking about it as a county-wide housing trust fund, which would change the proportion of the levy, because then the city of Winona would also be contributing towards it.
You have to, that isn't just automatic. That has, I think there's statutory.
I don't know what it takes for that.
We can have a countywide, but the levy from SEMCRA would be for out county. And we could bring in the local government aid into that same housing trust fund. And then when that money comes in, it could be split.
What's
between
this
the two.
local government aid, Ms. Holte? Are you familiar with what she's referring to, that we're getting some local government
It's,
aid?
I'm
Which
saying it
fund are you
wrong.
talking
It's
about?
local housing aid,
Yeah, right.
local housing aid.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
not a
and-
regular county program.
Yeah.
And
it's
are
not
we
OG.
getting a defined amount for 24?
Yes,
I believe it's
Mr. Boga has an
132,000
answer?
approximately.
it was just in the presentation today.
I know.
Which presentation?
Buffy just
From
mentioned the
Micah.
amount. It's 132,000. It wasn't actually Micah's presentation.
Okay, and so that comes with what strings?
Again, we haven't gotten that information at that point. We
You
just
can
know
only
that
use it for certain things, correct? We
Right,
can't just
housing.
use it to
I-
buy,
Housing.
Yeah,
pardon me,
housing.
housing. So why is the
Strategy.
county getting this?
Many counties actually do housing. I
Right,
understand that
well, we do-
Winona County doesn't
Well,
and
we
hasn't.
do
but-
housing through this,
That's
because we
right.
have housing in Lewiston, we have housing in St. Charles.
Yeah,
we have-
absolutely.
We have some housing in the city of Winona, those apartments.
Yep.
We do. SEMCRA does. So don't tell me we don't do housing. We do.
No,
So-
we don't do housing where the county owns it.
Well, no, because we're part of a multi-county and the SEMCRA owns it or manages it, and we've got different arrangements at different properties. So this 120,000, well, there's your 50 and 40, right? Or you don't know that you can use it for that? We don't know what we
I-
can use it for.
I don't know what the parameters are right now.
I think Ms.
When-
Baranik feels like we probably have to write a grant to get in. We have to have match money to contribute towards it.
Yeah, but do we have to write a grant to get this 120,000?
What I am understanding is the 132,000,
132.
the local housing aid is coming directly to the city of Winona, larger cities, and the county directly. There's no, you're not applying for it. It's coming to you like your LGA is coming to you, just directly comes to you. And what I just learned in the presentation, I thought I heard that there's a bigger chunk coming for 24 and 25, and then there's a smaller amount that's going to be coming long-term. It was like 6.8 million, 5.3 million for 23 and 24, and 6.8 million going forward. So it sounds like this could be money that's going to come to the counties.
So
The
base
only
your
thing I know-
request if you're going with option B, that this money, this additional new money that's coming from the state legislature, make up the shortfall of over the 100,000.
So this may be for Administrator Holte. We set a preliminary levy and it just means we can't go higher, but we can go lower. So if we answered those questions, we could potentially reduce the SEMCRA levy when we had answers to those questions. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Looking at Pat to make
Yes.
sure. Is that accurate, Pat?
Does the final one happen in December as well?
Yes.
Yes, that would happen towards December, but this would be the max, and then you can only go down from there. You can't increase.
But we could potentially go down when we have a better
We could
understanding.
potentially, and the
Yep.
history of Winona County is that we rarely have gone down.
Yeah, but we never, well, at
But you
least in
can
my,
increase.
in my time in office, we've never changed the SEMCRA levy. So
Buffy does a marvelous job with it. He's a creative manager.
In the past, I had some reservations, concerns with the former director. I no longer have those reservations about SEMCRA.
Slowly getting rid of some of that. I think
Yep.
we're almost done with that.
St. Charles, yep.
is there further,
Well, there were a lot of
Yep. Yep.
other ones you don't know about
Yep.
in other counties.
is there further discussion on the motion that's on the table?
I won't support the motion. I just feel it's wrong that I have to ask local property taxpayers to cover ways to collect money from other government entities.
To restate the motion, Commissioner Vagley has moved and Commissioner Meyer has seconded to accept option B as it was presented by SEMCRA
As a preliminary levy.
as a preliminary levy for 2024. If there is no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And if you are opposed,
Nay,
Yay.
okay, motion fails.
I'm gonna make a motion that we keep option A at 100,000 as previous years, and then we go with option B in its full amount.
I'm sorry, can you restate that?
Or the option B would be the 90,000,
Yeah,
option A would be 100,000.
so 190,000?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, is there discussion?
Splitting hairs.
Okay, is there discussion, further discussion? Commissioner Ward?
Does that motion include the 132,000, the discussion to be applied with the 132,000 that may come? If we receive that it may reduce the local levy and we can, you're talking levy here.
Mhm.
This is another pot of money. It's not levy, it's state
Got, yeah,
dollars. So will that discussion still happen if we receive that 132,000? Or are you just?
Can
putting
always
a
go
levy?
down.
Pardon me?
Can always go down.
So it's still open for discussion, is what I'm hearing.
Before the final levy.
further discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Olson has moved, Commissioner Vagley has seconded a proposal of a levy of $190,000 with the understanding that if the housing money is available and can be applied, that this levy may potentially be decreased. If there is no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buffy.
Thank you.
So thank you for waiting so patiently. Item 7.5, we are going to receive a presentation on the WRAP Plus program.
You sure guys don't want to take a break?
Do we
Poor
want
Tani.
to,
Who set this agenda? It's ridiculous.
do we,
I'm sorry.
I mean, do we
Yeah,
want to
could we
make
take
a
yeah, I could
5-minute
use-
break?
I
So-
tried to give you all a heads up.
We will return to,
I think the wrap should have a wrap though.
we'll come back at 1 minute after.
Does the AC turn off? Is it just me going through midlife crisis?
No, people,
Probably
yeah,
not.
it is warm in here.
What's going on? Call Aaron. I'd be all over that if I was working.
Okay.
Well, if on the system, we could easily cool this room down.
Is it warm? Is it warm?
Yes, it's warm. I'm sweating like a. So,
Are you warm, Marie?
A little warm, yeah.
Oh, it's noticeably different from when we started.
Yeah, it's more
I keep
stuffy.
feeling once in a while I get a little cool breeze. So then Dwayne starts talking.
And the hot air comes.
Huh? Really?
Well, we're cutting back. We're cutting back.
My presentation's only 2 hours long.
Only? Quick one.
Any left?
There's water and there's lukewarm decaffeinated coffee. Water is warm too.
This is extra warm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, you gotta-
Chris, what do you want?
Yeah.
Something about if you wanted.
I was
the
having
makeup
trouble.
ones already in the
Keep
packet.
my eyes open.
Okay, yeah, I know. Thank you. Yep.
Got bigger font at least.
Hey, see how those cookies?
I think you're gonna have to bring sandwiches.
Yeah, I tried. I'll bring that up when I review.
Yes. Yeah. Surprise.
But you got to see her. Oh, sure. Oh, we gotta put it up on. I can't.
I'm sorry, I would have been. I'm trying to be in a fourth floor.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, didn't work.
But that's good to remember, all that transportation. You won't need that house head soon. From those city folks paying for that rural road.
Right, when we're already paying for our own street.
Keeps digging, keeps digging. Oh my God, it's hot.
You know, all right, so when I was out in the hall and then I just came in, yes, it's pretty warm in here. It might improve if we open the doors, but I don't know, but it is kind of warm in here. But you probably need to have another cookie, I think. Cheer yourself
I
up.
haven't had,
You haven't
came
had
straight from work.
You haven't had anything to eat?
I came straight from work and I told Doreen that when we do these 5 o'clocks, I don't have time to eat. She goes, oh, you could stop somewhere. And I said, I'll remember that for your review. That's okay. We withheld some funding. I think that should go to the commissioner meal allowance fund.
There's still water in there, Craig?
There is. I haven't drank it all yet, but I'm
He's working on it though.
pouring some over my head.
Where would you cross?
I'll put my shoe back on.
Dwayne, have you seen this? I sign up for these things all the time. The RAP program basically funds a bunch of these trainings and they're free. They're at Hiawatha Valley Mental.
No, I just saw it in the packet, but I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, so I'm going to Cultural Humility. That's Kathy Sublet's organization.
Wonderful.
And I've been convincing some other people to come to that poverty simulation.
That's in the folder, right?
Yeah, well, it might not be. It might be that I brought it from home because Colleen gives it to us at the CJCC all the time. Yeah, there you go.
We got your back.
They might want to stay in jail if it's this hot.
I feel like every minute that goes by, the temp goes up 1 degree.
It's because we're talking. We're just all full of hot air up here and we're heating up the room.
Yeah.
Cooler.
Yeah,
I did send a message to find out,
well,
but yeah,
just
we
even-
can open those.
okay, yeah, we can make them.
If you just open the door, I think
Can I
it'll be
take if I take it off?
cooler.
There's a thing right here.
Like we live in a green society, but don't open the windows. You're gonna hit the high points.
Yep. 43 pages.
And, the rest of the story or something.
Yarin, Mr. Lefiki is checking on.
Yeah.
This would be out if you ever get it.
Amazing. Okay. Reconvene.
All right. Well, I believe you said last. Let's just put it that way. Chair Myers, Ms. Holte, Allison, thank you for inviting us.
It's an echo. I don't know. Maybe.
Okay, if it's just Colleen.
Testing.
Somebody was trying to get a hold of us online.
No.
No, you should be good.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting us to talk about our RAP Plus program. I did provide everyone with a packet of information. No county monies were expended on the color copies. I provided those to you. And I will refer to the handout during the presentation to kind of give some context to that. I do also have members of our team sitting here behind me. I'll introduce them later on, and we'll come up. So RAP Plus. It's echoing again.
It is.
It might be Heidi's mic. Feedback.
Or one of the attendees is unmuted themselves?
Nope.
How do we shut these off?
Can you test again?
Testing. It seems fine.
Yep.
Okay.
It seemed to happen when the presentation came up.
Oh. Well, there's no sound associated with the
I know that.
presentation,
I know
so.
that.
All right, well, Winona, RAP Plus stands for Winona County Reentry Assistance Program. It is a grant-funded program funded by the JMHCP, or Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Grant, which is a federal grant. The description of the JMHCP is on the slideshow. I just want to point out, go back one slide, please. Just want to point out to you that the grant amount was just shy of $725,000. We were one of 29 awards in 2020 in the nation. We were the only grant awarded in Minnesota. These are not easy grants to get. And this was our second federal JMHCP grant. So if you look at the next page, there is a listing of all of the grants that have funded our successive reentry programs throughout the years since 2019. We started, next slide, please. Started with the CARE Community Assessment and Reintegration Program, funded largely by state funds through the Office of Justice. And continuing on with our first federal grant, JMHCP grant, and then our second grant, our current grant. I would note that we recently got our RAP Plus grant extended for another year. So it runs through September 30th of 2024. That's the fiscal year for the government grants. Next slide, please.
So I'm sorry, so CARE doesn't exist anymore, now it's called
Here
RAP?
morphed into RAP,
Okay, so it's that,
and RAP became RAP Plus.
okay, all right.
Yep. But I mean, if you look at the dollars,
Keep our clock at
Battery.
they don't need that. If you look at the
funding dollars.
Yes, the battery's dead.
Is it? Okay,
Please continue.
sorry.
Disregard the man behind the curtain.
Roll with the punches.
We're throwing more curve,
Really good.
throwing more curveballs.
Next, they'll take away the podium.
I thought it didn't matter pushing a button again. I'm sorry. The red light was on.
We really do need that IT money, so send it. Back to the last slide, I just want to point out that the reentry programs have been grant funded for many years. Okay. Next slide, please. We have several very important partners in the RAP Plus program. Our primary mental health agency partner, which was a requirement of the grant, is Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center. They've been a very good partner with us, very involved, very important. We really appreciate their involvement. We were involved until July 1st of this year with the Winona Community Hub. We'll talk about a little transition that we have made since that time, but we are very appreciative for their efforts too. And then of course, Winona County, and then of course, the funding is coming from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, so the federal government. Next slide.
She might be helping Pat with the batteries.
Okay. Copies of the presentation. We have, now I have to try to read it. We have 3 program goals. The first is to develop a coordinated cross-systems approach to reduce recidivism, which is essentially the reentry portion of the program. The second goal is to enhance our in-jail behavioral health services, and chemical dependency services. I'll talk about what that involves. And then the third goal is to provide extensive cross-training for criminal justice system personnel and behavioral health and dependency providers to bridge knowledge gaps and basically get people sharing understanding of how things work in the system. And I'm going to talk about these backwards. So I'm going to start with goal 3. Next slide. Goal 3 has been our extensive cross-training program. This has been an incredibly successful part of our grant. We have offered monthly or twice monthly free trainings to anyone who wants to attend, some in person, some online. You can look at the different topics that we have covered. We have had really good attendance. We are drawing in people from other counties. We're drawing in probation. We're drawing in social workers, Olmsted, Fillmore, Houston, Winona, all over. So this has just been incredibly successful. I think this is something that could certainly continue beyond the context of the grant. It's just so very important. We get great feedback on it. I gave you some statistics about the number of total training sessions we've had over the last couple of years. How many participants, so that's like how many people attended every training, and then you just add that. Some people attend all trainings. I do. And then we've had 3,072 training hours delivered, all for free. We do offer it free to participants. Some of our speakers we do pay a stipend to, but many volunteer. Many people who have that knowledge are willing to share that with others because they know how incredibly important that is. Next slide. Second goal is to enhance the in-jail chemical dependency and mental health services, which has certainly been a challenge with COVID and building a new jail, as you can well imagine. The most important component of that is our jail social worker, who is here. She's going to talk a little bit later, but Katie Schild, wearing black and white. And there's just a brief description of what she's doing. She's going to go into a little bit more depth about what she does in the jail when she has her chance to speak. And then the chemical dependency and mental health services, we had anticipated being able to offer some cognitive behavioral skills classes, so getting the person to change their mindset, if you will, in the jail, but without being able to have people in the jail, that was difficult to do. So that was one of the reasons that we were given our grant extension, is to fully implement that program. Next slide. And finally, the first goal is our enhanced reentry program. So the slide talks about what a reentry program is. Reentry is basically to help somebody who is transitioning from jail to the community to be successful. But ours is enhanced because we don't require a person to spend a day in jail to participate in our program. Next slide. So what is enhanced about RAP Plus? As I just said, we have expanded our eligibility criteria, and I did provide you with an application for our program in your packet. which talks about some of that eligibility criteria. We also do risk, mental health, and chemical dependency screenings at the jail or upon referral to the program. So for those who are coming in from outside the jail, we do screenings on those folks. We pair qualified individuals with a jail social worker or now a mental health practitioner, also called an adult rehabilitative mental health services worker, to work with the participant to identify what areas they need help in and to help them access services. And then we also offer funding to assist with different things that they need help with to meet their case plan. So think rent, think bus passes, things like that. So I talked about the change that we had up until June of 2023. We utilized the Winona Community Hub community connectors as those linkages for people, the case managers. We have since switched to mental health practitioners or ARMS workers. Those workers have a specific mental health focus, and this is a mental health grant. And so it was a better fit for us to make that switch. Next slide.
Are those people readily, is that a new career type of thing, or are they certified, or?
Yep, they've been around. They have statutory requirements. My understanding is, and Christy Farrington is online, but I think they have about, I want to say 40 plus employees, and I'll let her weigh in on that if she wants to, but I think that's a growing field. And yeah, we're excited to have the two that we have because workforce challenges are real. So talk about who qualifies. RAP Plus isn't just for people getting out of jail or prison. And here's where I'd maybe refer you to your application, which is in your folder. It's the very last thing, I believe, on the right side. If you look at page 5, there's a list of what could qualify a person as justice system involvement. So you'll see that it's expanded from simply an arrest, a criminal charge. It could be a call for service. It could be involvement in a child protection case. So really trying to expand the reach of the program to help those people that have a demonstrated need. We do have exclusions from the program. That is a federal requirement of our grant. And so we do have to run criminal histories on our participants, and we're authorized to do that by them giving us authority by signing the application. And RAP Plus is a voluntary program. So again, any participant has to sign a release of information to participate. A person can apply for RAP Plus as many times as they want to. Sometimes it takes a while for people to realize that they need help. Next slide. So I'm going to introduce the staff who are here, and there are some online. You've already, and I'll make you stand up, guys. So Katie Schild, if you can stand up. Why don't you come up here so they can get on the camera? So this is Katie. Katie's going to say a few words. She's our jail social worker. Trish Chandler. Trish. Okay. She's our jail intake worker. We have one of our mental health practitioners here, Trish Costello. Might be a familiar face to some of you. So Trish works for Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center, newly hired as a mental health practitioner. We have Karen Heider, who's a part of our program, who I believe spoke with you before. She's our treatment court coordinator. I'm the grant manager. And then we have leadership from Christy Farrington, who I know is online. I don't know if you can take the slide down. I don't know how hard it is to take the slide down, but if you wanted to, we could have Christy pop in. We have Sierra Shear. She's also online, and so she's doing the same role as Trish Costello as a mental health practitioner. Eric Sievers, so the executive director of Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center, has been very involved in our program. And then Karen Sonneman is the county department head that's overseeing RAP Plus. If we can get the gallery on here, that's what Heidi's trying to do. If not, we can move ahead. So next slide, I'm going to have Katie talk about what she does.
Okay, hi, I'm Katie. I am a licensed social worker and a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. I've been with RAP since 2021, I think is when I started, September. I meet with every single person that comes through the jail as long as they're willing to meet with me. I go over the screeners that's in that application that you have. Based off of those screeners, it kind of gauges what may be helpful in regards to resources for substance use and mental health. A big piece of this program is it's a mental health grant. So them completing that diagnostic assessment, mental health assessment is a requirement and they have to be willing to do that, right? But I am able to help them get those services established before they leave the jail, and then they can continue, right? So there's that continuum of care to help them be successful. Some of the other things that I've seen success in is sometimes someone will come into jail and they'll be like, hey, Katie, I already did a CD assessment. You know, I'm supposed to be going to treatment today, but I just got picked up. And I am able to get that information verified and communicate with their public defender, and they're able to be released that same day after court. I've seen it happen on a few occasions, but I feel like that's a success, right? So I speak with the behavioral health funds worker to verify insurance, give the inmates Mentor and CAF applications, attend their first appearances, make referrals, and that's for everybody. So then what's different for the people who qualify for RAP is going to be that continued case management. So again, why they're in custody and up to 60 days post-release, submitting the funding request, doing the warm handoffs to the mental health practitioners, and then I'm also on the CJCC meetings and serve on the treatment court team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I, don't run away. So how many people, how many people are you? what's
So
your
just
caseload, I
this
guess?
month, I think we already have 7, 8 people that have been accepted, right? But then it's working with them to get that mental health assessment completed. So then they become a participant. I think since I've been here, I've met with a total of 1,000 people in the jail.
So what percentage do you feel wants to take advantage of the program?
Clean has some good data sheets. It's really, yeah.
It's not a high percentage. Everybody gets screened,
Yeah.
but not everybody needs to apply. So we have way more people that are screened than actually apply. We are hoping and thinking that with the new jail environment and Katie being able to sit down in person with people and use her motivational interviewing skills and all her other skills, that she'll be able to engage more people more readily in the program. But it's been a challenge. And that's not unusual. I mean, it's not that, we're getting people, but it's voluntary. It's not a court-ordered thing. And so they have to want to do it. I just want to say the CAF is a combined application form. So it's an application for benefits. So Katie does a great job of getting people on the benefits, getting, I would say 98% of our people are on medical assistance. So we're getting them the insurance, which can be a big barrier for people to access services.
Is it fair to say that even like a 5 or 10 to 15% decrease in recidivism, I can't say that word, this makes a big difference? I mean, you don't need 100% success. You don't need 50%.
Right. And it could be a reduction. I actually just sat in on a seminar where they talk about, reduction in recidivism. It used to be the gold standard, but now they're really looking at other elements. And you'll see that in the PowerPoint that we're looking at other ways to measure success. Did they get their license back? Are they renting instead of couch hopping? Things like that. Recidivism can be so variable depending upon your probation agents. They can decide, yeah, I want to call that person on a warrant, or they can decide, no, we're going to work with that person. So it can vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, which is why kind of the people that I deal with on the higher level say, yeah, you can do that, but don't rely upon that because there's so many variables. Okay, so next slide. Now I'm going to put Trish on the spot.
I'm the jail intake worker. I do want to add to that. Even though people might not apply or qualify right away, everyone has a huge caseload. Everyone's working with a lot of folks to try to get goals met. And even though they might not meet them right away, they might come back into our program and then eventually meet all the goals that they were trying to meet. So those all the list of things that I do, but my main thing that I focus on, that I think that the jail intake worker, the big key is the pretrial bail evaluations. And what that is anybody that comes into custody on like a new charge or a warrant for missing a first appearance, I do a bail evaluation on, and that's used in the court when they set conditions of release or bail. But part of that is when I do those evaluations, I dig deep into what's going on with that person court-wise, law enforcement-wise, criminal justice-wise. probation, those things. And I can bring that to our jail so we can better take care of folks while they're in custody and know what's going on, because they might have things going on in other counties. You know, sometimes I have people that have cases in 5, 6 different counties. And just to coordinate all that stuff so people aren't just constantly going through each revolving door of each county. So I bring that to the jail and for the folks in the jail, so, you know, we can get them what they need there, and then also pass that on to Katie so she can coordinate services for them while they're in custody and then when they get out of custody for when they're released. So, and then I process all those applications, and that involves criminal histories and stuff too, and it works well with the Bailey Valves. So, any questions before I?
Thank you.
Marcia's thinking. Yeah, Commissioner Ward's thinking about it.
The process in the applications is a lot of work because she's got to look at every single one of these applications, and these applications are available online in paper format, and Trish processes every single one of them. So if you think about Katie interviewing 1,000 people, Trish is processing 1,000 applications, and that's since basically November-ish of 2021. So that's a lot. Okay, next slide. So I'm not going to put the brand new mental health practitioners on the spot, but I like to refer to their job as where the magic happens. So these are the folks that are working directly with the participant, implementing a case plan or treatment plan for them to include goals and action steps to try to address whatever barriers they've experienced in their life that prevents them from being successful in the community. And Karen Heider serves as a case manager for anybody who's in treatment court. And then the other folks are assigned to one of the 2 mental health practitioners, Trish or Sierra, to work with. By the way, we have 2 Trish C's on our team, if you noticed. So this Trish here is Jail Trish. So if you see her, you can call her Jail Trish.
So I did come up with a question.
Yeah.
So everything you're talking about here is that they are in jail. Now, a number of years, or maybe I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Okay, okay. So, but they've been charged with a case, or?
Nope.
I'm referring to a program that commissioners talked about over in Blue Earth County, Mankato.
The Yellow Line Project? Yeah.
Right.
No, if you look at page 5, if they satisfy any one of those check boxes on the bottom that says criminal justice involvement, they can get into our program.
Oh, your application.
It looks like this on the front page. It was the very last
not
thing
page 5,
on the right side of your folder.
Uh-huh.
So any one of those things could qualify them for the program. Like I said, a child protection case, which doesn't necessarily involve criminal charges, although it can, would qualify somebody. A call for service. So somebody, a harassment restraining order. So really, you know, we're looking at elements of criminal justice involvement, not just involving incarceration. Yeah. All right, grant manager, what do? Nothing. I let these guys do all the work. No, I'm responsible basically for the oversight, programmatic wise and financial wise of the program. And you've got a witness here, Pat, to my abilities to manage the financial end of things. Pat and I work very well together and have for the last however many years we've had grants. I'm responsible for attending all of the meetings, documenting everything, updating our policy guides and forms. By the way, we have lots of forms, videos on our website. If you want to learn more about the program, please go there. We are updating them because of the switchover, but there's still some good information there. I do all the grant reports, so I monitor our program goals and objectives, do some research to try to improve the program. We're always trying to improve and make sure that we are in legal compliance with everything. So next slide. We, as I said before, offer funding to our participants. So this was alluded to earlier, but we have people that apply that meet eligibility criteria. They are called accepted applicants. But we require them to go a couple of steps further to be fully engaged in the program before we will allow them to access the larger pot of money that we offer. And those people we call participants. So there's a difference between accepted applicants where they meet the eligibility criteria and the participants. To get from one stage to the other, the accepted applicant has to undergo a comprehensive evaluation at Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center. So that's where we get the mental health assessment performed. Some of them also undergo chemical dependency assessments if they demonstrate that need, but not everybody does because, again, it's a mental health grant. It's a mental health program. And then they need to sign a release of information to allow us to share information between each other to properly serve them. Listed on this slide are some of the things that we provide funding for. Later on, I'll show you kind of how that has broken down over the last couple of years as far as what we've actually expended money on. This is an important piece of our program. There are success stories that I'll refer to later where the $400 that we paid for half a rent or the $680 that we paid for a driver's license reinstatement fee made a huge difference in that person's life. And it's something they would not have been able to do otherwise, and there's no other funding available for that. So
You saw fit to put the little box up there, so you track each person. You can only spend $2,000 on each.
yes, because we have about $42,000 set aside per year. And when you're looking at the number of participants we have, we can't have everybody max out. And it's not just a funding program. The funding is to complement the case plan. It is not just, come on, get in our program and we're going to fund up to $2,000 because we don't want people to abuse that. And the case managers are the ones that have to request that. Cannot be requested by a client, and it has to be in furtherance of their case plan, and they have to explore other resources first. That's not to say it's like super, super difficult to get, like some funding might be, but it has to be a really thoughtful process. And our case managers do a really good job of using that funding, I think, as a carrot. Okay, next slide. So program completion or termination, this is kind of where we are revising things. You'll see that for treatment court participants, if they graduate from treatment court, then they're considered to have completed our program, or if they're terminated from treatment court, they're terminated from the program. When we were working with the hub uses pathways, which are basically different types of goals. And if the person had completed at least half of the pathways on their initial case plan, they were successfully completed the program. With the mental health practitioners, we're still in the process of developing that. Quite frankly, we are in the midst of transferring cases over. And so this has been a challenge to pull this together for you because our first obligation is really to serve our clients. And then the jail social worker, same thing as the hub. So just that will be reviewed and changed, but that is what we were using up until July or June 30th. Next slide. I want to talk about the sequential intercept mapping because that came up in your meeting on Wednesday night with the City Council. We, as part of this grant, received another grant to do sequential intercept mapping. That was a process where we involved over 60 community members, a diverse group of community members, and we went through each intercept, if you will, of the criminal justice system and identified the gaps in services at each step, ideas for what we could do about those gaps in services, and we developed a SIM map, which is also located in your folder on the right side. It's a multi-page document that's got a table on it. So some of you had asked at the meeting on Wednesday night, well, what are the solutions? What are you doing about it? Take a look at that document. You're going to see some recurring themes there. What did we do about that at our CJCC? Well, next slide.
Before we go on, I
Yeah.
just want to say that this is a fantastic program with the world's worst name, sequential intercept mapping. Oh my gosh. Does anyone know what that means?
It's very distinctive. I mean, you wouldn't confuse it with anything else, would you?
My eyes are, I'm used to acronyms and jargon and bureaucratic babble, but that's a doozy, but it's a wonderful program.
Yeah,
So,
I will note that we like to do things differently in Winona County. So instead of just starting at the intercept that they start at, we went back to like -1 intercept because the earlier you can intercept people, the less cost, right? And so we mapped back even further. So you'll see we have a -1 intercept, which, don't tell the people that do that, but we did it. So what we ended up doing is we ended up focusing on some of the needs that were identified and created work groups with our CJCC committees, and we've been working on them. So Commissioner Meyer referred to the Hope for Homes. That's actually the supportive housing work group. And actually, we have been looking at and worked up local housing trust fund documents, policies, agreements. That is something that is definitely recommended. We participated in a Housing Partnership Institute, several of us, for 18 months and went every 4 months for a day and a half and listened to the funders and listened to the experts and worked up the local housing trust fund as one project and then scattered site supportive housing as another project. And you'll see later on, housing is a significant need for this population of people. We have also been working on other projects. The Navigator Network is a very successful work group. Navigator Network brings together people just like these case managers who help people navigate resources in the community, and it helps them share information. They have a presentation every month by somebody in the community about a program, and they learn more about what programs are available to make those referrals happen. And you'll see that that is documented on the sequential intercept map as one of the goals, and we've done it. So next slide. So I'm going to talk to you about the enrollment data. Marcia, you had asked, or Commissioner Ward, you had asked about, how many people are enrolled. This slide talks about how many accepted applicants we have. So again, those people who meet eligibility criteria, that's in blue. And then how many participants. So those people who take that extra step to get that comprehensive evaluation or diagnostic assessment or mental health assessment, however you want to refer to it. The numbers have been trending upwards. I can tell you that already this quarter, I believe we have 5 accepted applicants, and that's in a period of, or participants, and that's in a period of transition. So we are, working diligently with the people that we have. You cannot have a high caseload with this population of people because it's very time intensive to help them with these very difficult problems. Next slide. Just some demographic data for you as far as we serve more males than females. So the blue is the males on the left. Ethnicity, largely non-Hispanic, and the population, 83 out of the total 105 were white, 20 Black, and 2 biracial. So that's our demographic information about our participants. Next slide. This is a slide that's taken basically directly from your application. The participants are asked to identify, what do you think you need? And these are the results. 94 out of 105 said housing. So whether that is housing just, renting, or housing like I need to transition from my current housing situation to another, but that is the number one by far need. And then second is transportation, and third is mental health treatment. Not everybody who needs mental health treatment acknowledges that they need it. Next slide. I took the top 2 participant needs and combined them. We asked people, what are your top 2 needs? And so on the application form says, what are your top 2 needs? So again, housing, by far and large, number 1 need. Second, mental health. The others were less than 12 each. So when you ask them to parse out, what are your top 2 priorities? Those are the top 2 priorities. Next slide. This slide shows what kind of criminal justice involvement the folks say that they have. So understand that people can check multiple boxes. So on average, people check 4 of those boxes. They have 4 different types of justice involvement. Some people have 1, some people have 12, but on average it's 4. And the number 1 involvement is probation, second is arrested, third inmate, 4 pending charges. Okay, next slide. We do screening in the jail. We do a risk screen, which is called our ORAS. We do a mental health screen, the BJMHS, Brief Jail Mental Health Screen. And we do a substance abuse screen, not because substance abuse qualifies them for the program, but because it's to identify whether they need further assessment in that area. And that's called the TCU DS5, Texas Christian University Drug Screen -5. So here I've listed what our average scores are from our participants, which is 5, and a score of 3 or 4 indicates high risk. For the brief gel mental health screen, a score of 2 on the main questions indicates a need for further assessment. And on the next slide, we'll talk about, they split up their questions between their main questions and then 2 other questions, either of which a positive answer to will qualify a person. Yeah.
Bob, risk for what?
Risk for reoffense.
Okay, thank you.
And then
Down by themselves, or are they coached through this whole?
So those are the 1,000 people I meet with, or that I've met with, is I go over these screeners with every single one of them.
Okay, so
So
you,
it's self-report, right? It's what they're reporting to me.
okay, but they're sitting down with you. They're not just sitting at home at the table filling this out. Okay, because I think you get different results.
okay. And then the TCUDS-5, a score of 2 indicates the need for further assessment. We got an average of 7. Next slide. The brief gel mental health screen sections off 2 of their questions, number 6 and 7, separately, and a positive answer to either one of those would qualify a person for the program. So I think that's very interesting to see that we've got 62 of the 105 say that they're currently taking a medication prescribed for them by any emotional or mental health problem, and 63 have been hospitalized for emotional and mental health problems. Next slide. The primary mental health diagnosis of participants should come as no surprise to you since you heard this last Wednesday. Depression and anxiety are the top 2, followed by PTSD, bipolar, and a smattering of other diagnoses. That's the primary diagnosis, the first one listed. Next slide. When you combine all diagnoses, so often people will have a diagnosis of adjustment disorder, depressed mood, generalized anxiety disorder, something else. And so when you combine all of them, depression and anxiety again rank number 1 and 2. Next slide. This is the same analysis for their chemical health. So what is the primary chemical health diagnosis? Now understand again that not everybody has a chemical health diagnosis because it's a mental health grant. So the number 1 though is stimulant disorder, amphetamine. So that could be meth. Okay. Followed by cannabis use, which that'll be interesting to see what the legislation does with that, and then alcohol use. Next slide. Combining those, again, stimulant use disorder, number 1. Next slide. So this slide, apologies for the small font, but this slide shows what are we funding? What are we getting requests for? Huge amounts of housing support. Almost $45,000 in housing support. The next closest is transportation, and then work related. And the transportation actually has gone up. We looked at our data and we saw that an awful lot of people had driver's licenses that were not valid. And so as a committee, we have a task force that meets and talks about this every month. And we made a policy decision that we were going to fund driver license reinstatement fees. And so we've been able to allow people to get their driver's licenses paid through the program. That's a $680 fee.
Which allows them to go to work sometimes or to drive further.
Right. It's a barrier that if you don't have think about yourself if you don't have a license, right? It's a barrier. Next.
What about the insurance that goes along with the license?
We don't pay insurance.
You don't pay insurance.
No, we don't pay car repairs. We don't provide gas cards. There's certain types of funding we don't provide. We don't provide security deposits because how are you going to collect that at the end of the grant? You know, so we have certain categories of things that we will fund and some that we don't. This slide just shows program length. So what was the shortest time in the program? 41 days. That person did not successfully complete the program. Average is 188 days. The longest was 567 days. And that person successfully completed the program. So,
which is longer than this meeting.
Yeah, which is amazing, right?
I'm getting punchy.
Would you like a cookie? Next slide.
I'm gonna steal your mic again.
So this slide talks about completions versus unsuccessful terminations. So you can see that in the beginning, as we were getting things figured out, we had a number of unsuccessful completions, but since that time, it's been trending very positively upward with our highest number just this last quarter of completions of 14 versus 2 unsuccessful terminations. Next slide.
Your lack of color makes it a little more challenging.
I gave you a color copy.
There's a colored copy in
Yeah,
your,
in the, right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a very interesting slide. This shows the housing situation. So if you look at the left, you look at the blue incarcerated and homeless, that's at intake. So for each participant at program intake, we do an assessment basically of where are they at different domains of their life. What's their housing situation? What's their license situation? What's their job situation? And then when they terminate, whether it's successfully or unsuccessfully, we compare the two. And so that's what this comparison is in the blue, that's how they came into the program. And then in the orange, that's what happened when they left. So take a look at the renting bar, that orange bar versus the incarcerated and homeless. Significant impact in a very challenging 1% vacancy rate city.
0 incarcerated and 0 homeless.
Right. And that's graduates. So these are the graduates. We had 48 graduates. Let's flip to the next slide because that shows overall. Okay. So we still, on the unsuccessful discharge, as you may well imagine, you're going to have some of those folks return back to that, pre-program situation. But still in all, when you look at the overall lines, trend lines, we're doing a great job on getting them housed in a very difficult market. And I give a lot of credit to our.
Are you looking, do you have any statistics? Are they looking for housing within so many miles of the jail and all these services? I mean, are you looking
Nope.
for housing in St. Charles and they have to commute into?
Our program is a Winona County program. So once they move out of the county, we can't fund them. So it's within Winona County somewhere. We've definitely had people housed in St. Charles. Yep.
But probably the majority you have in the city.
Part of that is due to their transportation issues. If they need to bike to work, it's not going to happen from St. Charles to Winona. So, I mean, but yeah, but
Downhill.
Not after work.
That's downhill.
Next slide.
Ride with the Amish in the town.
Okay, and this is also another great illustration of how many people came into the program unemployed on the blue bar on the left side, and then how many were employed full-time, the orange bar. And this is again graduates. So I think just demonstrates a really great impact of the program to help people with very challenging situations. Next slide.
What year time period? You said graduates, so this is from 2020.
So we spent the first year of the grant developing the program. So developing, we had we still have a lot of meetings, but we had a lot of meetings. We had 5 implementation committees. We had to hire staff. We had to do the policies and procedures and talk about how are we going to do this program. So we did a soft rollout or a slow rollout in July of 2021. And then November 1st of 2021 is when we started taking all the applications in the jail with people. So that's when Katie started doing all the applications in the jail with people. We consider that to be our full rollout.
That was what,
November 1st of 2021.
21.
Mhm.
So this.
Yep, so that's the time period you're really looking at here. This again kind of goes hand in hand with the employment information. If you take a look, the large, sky blue on the left slide is people that had no income, and compare and contrast that to the people at discharge who had no income. So 36 people had no income at all when they came in, and this is everybody, okay? And then 7 had no income when they left. The green is a job, full or part-time, so 23 people had a job when they came in, 42 people left with a job. Understand that sometimes people are disabled and can't work, right? So them not having a job doesn't mean that they don't have income. It could be that they're helping them get whatever income they're entitled to. Okay, next slide. Driver's license. So again, this was an identified need. This is all persons. If you take a look, the driver's license not currently valid column was was high, and that's what we saw. And so then we made that policy change in 2022 to allow for the payment of the reinstatement fee. And you can see that we had about 10, 12 people that actually achieved their driver's license. Not necessarily through funding through our program. It could have been just working with that person and understanding and navigating that very difficult system to understand, what do I got to do to get my license back? But I think that's a huge success too. Next slide. Physical health. So you can see that on the left side, we've got people that had no established medical, whoops, should be provider, sorry, typo. And then on the right side, whether they have compliance with their medical health provider in orange. Other, the orange bar for other could be if we have a client who loses touch with us, typically they would be unsuccessfully discharged and you might not know what their status is. So you have to answer other because you don't know what their current status is. So that's why you might see that column be a little bit higher. Next slide. Mental health therapy. So if you take a look, the blue bar on the left shows how many people were not receiving mental health services when they came into the program. And then the orange bars show what happened after that. We did determine when doing the data analysis that we needed to add a column for completed treatment. Some of our case managers hand wrote that in there, but it wasn't a selection. But it's important because it's a mental health program. So if they complete treatment, we need to document that. Next slide. We also track mental health medications. So if they're on medications at intake, are they taking them as prescribed? Often people will have a prescription, but maybe be not taking them as they are prescribed. And so then the third column is they were prescribed medications and they are taking them as prescribed. So we've seen an uptick in that. Next slide. Chemical dependency treatment. This is one where we, again, need to track the completed treatment. We've got, I think, 7 of them listed there that completed treatment. But as we go through our forms and improve, that's going to be something we add, that they completed treatment. But we can see that we have decreased the not receiving chemical dependency service. Now understand that that first column also means those people that didn't need it in the first place, right? Because their issue was mental health, not chemical dependency. Next slide. We've got some success stories here. I know they're a little bit difficult to read, but this gentleman got first month's rent. He said RAP Plus made it possible for me to grow and excel in my recovery. After treatment, I was working full-time and still unable to financially recover from a purchase as big as my first apartment. By helping with the first month rent, I was able to move into a place and maintain my bills. This gave me the freedom to earn independence and to cherish the things I have. I wish I could explain how grateful I am and express how much this program has worked for me. If I don't move into my apartment and grow this way, I don't think I would be where I am today. Giving me the shelter allowed me to focus on my goals, mental health, and future. I got my license, I got 2 jobs, started a family, made a life. Sorry, I don't ever think what you're doing for us doesn't help. It does. 10 out of 10, 5 stars. That's our review. Next slide. And these people gave authority to share their story. This woman received rent and she also had some education expenses paid. So she came into the program with nothing. She wasn't able to provide for her family. It would have been very easy for her to relapse and give up. She's been in the same apartment for 15 months. She has her nail technician and esthetician license, again, with guaranteed income. She's working towards her AP esthetician licensing and her driver's license. Thank you so much. RAP Plus gave me my life back, 10 plus. Next slide. This gentleman said I needed to get my license back so I could drive to work and make my meetings and appointments. I was relying on my parents to drive me to all my different obligations and it was very hard on them. I have my driver's license for the first time in 20 plus years. I am way more self-sufficient and I feel like I'm finally able to take care of my responsibilities by myself. I really appreciate the help I received from RAP Plus. Like I said before, this is the first time in 20 plus years I've had my license. It's one of the biggest accomplishments in many years. 10 plus, thank you. And then we're going to hear directly from some participants about their experience. So Heidi will have to click on the first tab here. Hopefully the sound works. Nope. We're hoping that she's trying to get this to play.
Share sound.
Hello, my name is D'Angelo Marshall. I became involved in the RAP Plus program because my daughter's mother failed to take care of her and the county started a CHIP case on us.
Nope. What happened? What happened? We're doing something.
Hello, my name is D'Angelo Marshall. I became involved in the RAP Plus program because my daughter's mother failed to take care of her and the county started a CHIP case on us. I moved to Winona to get custody of my daughter, my 1-year-old daughter. When I moved here, I was homeless and did not have a job and had very few resources. My CHIPS attorney referred me to the RAP Plus program and I started with the program this spring. My RAP Plus worker met with me and asked about my situation. She told me about the purpose and benefit of the program. We formed a plan for me to get structure and foundation to start a life in Winona. She helped me with my financial literacy. We formed a work plan and she helped me with my resumes. She was also a listening ear. Each month I made progress on my plan. I went from having no job to a low-paying job to a higher-paying job to a stable employment. I received a bike to get to work and steel-toe shoes for work. Most importantly, she helped me find housing and I got a place for me and my daughter to live. Just last week, she helped me get enrolled in the tech school here and funding to help pay for it. I am very grateful for the help I received through the RAP Plus program to build a life in Winona and get my daughter back in my life and have a good career here.
While I was hospitalized, my son and I lost our home and many of our belongings. Being able to be a part of the RAP Plus program was such a blessing. I felt really down and like a failure after losing my home. I would not have been able to find a new home without this program. Rebecca was a wonderful and positive blessing. She kept in touch with me regularly and reassured me that things would get better. She also drove 4 hours to bring me home and helped me find some items for my home. She helped me to find mental health services. I'm very grateful for all of the help that the RAP Plus program provided.
Just to follow up, I want to highlight some of the handouts in your packet for training. So the blue and green document is our upcoming training. Everyone is welcome. They're very informative. I would highly encourage you to attend. I challenge everyone here to attend the poverty simulation that we held in October. This will allow you to walk in the shoes of your constituents to find out how easy or difficult it is to access resources. We have 2 university professors facilitate that. It's a very powerful training. So that's my challenge to you. Also include a brochure, which kind of summarizes the program, contains the contact information for everyone. Again, the STEM map, and then a description of how we at CDCC are implementing the STEM map and working on it. The folder contains my business card. I am delighted to sit down and talk further with you about what we're doing in this program or CJCC. I've also included Katie's business card. You are being asked to fund Katie's position starting in 2024. And I hope you do that. I think it's a very worthwhile expenditure of county taxpayer dollars. I think we have proven that this program is a great program and needs to continue. And Katie is a very vital part of that program. And so that is going to be coming before you. That's my ask, because I know at the last meeting, Commissioner Bagley said, what's your ask? Well, that's the ask on that position. I have more asks. I also think, I'm not on the opioid committee, But I do feel that the recovery support services funding that we offer through the RAP Plus program, the driver's license fee, the housing, whatever, is a critical component. And I do think you should give some serious consideration to setting aside some of that money every year to have available for people that need it, whether it's through the RAP Plus program or other programs. But it's really, really important. And so, no one asked, but I'm telling you, that's what I think. So, go for it.
First of all, I'm going to channel my inner Jerry Maguire. You had me at hello. This is a fantastic program. Thank you for what you're doing. And you said this is the only program in the state of Minnesota?
No, it was the only grant, the JNHCP
Okay,
grants.
I'm sorry, the only grant.
In 2020. No, there's other programs.
Mhm.
Ours is the best.
And this is it's an interesting way we began with a long discussion about, a discussion about public safety, law enforcement, et cetera. This is a fitting way to end tonight's discussion. Let's go back to the ask. What's the ask? Is that something does anyone know offhand what the ask involves?
So we have extended the grant. We do have funding available for other things, but we are asking for the county to fully fund, starting January 1 of 2024, the jail social worker position.
Do you know what that would be, ballpark?
Not offhand.
Okay.
That information comes later as part of your budget discussion.
Gotcha.
I will note that one of the reasons that the positions for Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center were changed from the community connector to the mental health practitioner is that that's a sustainable position. Medicaid funds those services, and we fully believe that that is going to be sustainable. And we want to keep the program going. We need it. It's great. Look at the results.
So Medicaid is a billable. You can bill Medicaid for some of this,
Yep.
but not the jail, whatever the title is.
Not that I've been able to determine, not the way this program is set up. There are some nuances to that, but no, the county needs to step up.
Just change the position and meet the
Nope.
expectations of
We had
Medicare.
$1.8 million of grant funding since 2019 to fund this program. And so I'm saying it's now time to step up to the plate and fund the jail social worker position. And I'm pretty firm about that, as you can probably tell.
And you live across the river. That's the point.
I've poured my heart and soul into this job for the last 15 years. That shouldn't matter.
We always need to look for other sources of funding.
We always do.
And again, if it's Medicare billable, we need to figure out how to tap into that as a resource.
I invite you to do the research and see if
Well, I'm not the expert. You claim to have, I know you have much more expertise than I ever would or would ever desire. So, I mean, again, we need to look at all alternatives for funding. Everything, not just this jail, it's everything that we do at the county. How do we pay for rock for our roads? It's all aspects.
Thank you for all that you do. And thank you all for sitting through all of the presentations.
And all the curveballs we threw you, mics,
Yeah.
echoes. Thank you, Kelly. Absolutely.
Of course.
I thought it was very fitting, even though it did take a long time. It was nice to sit and listen to all of the different programs that they brought before you today and do all of these reports. And however, there needs to be bridges between all of these different programs. Otherwise, people are double dipping into this and they're not really getting the full benefit. And that's where our program comes in to take snapshots of people and be like, oh, they're already getting this. They already have this system. They're already this. Let's get everybody on the same page and really use the resources that are being used in a good way to get the person moving along. And that's what we do. So, and Katie, the jail social worker is a vital part of the.
Thank you.
All right, you might wish that we were done, but you might recall that we moved 2 items off of consent to the end of tonight's agenda.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. That's it. Now it's done.
So item 6.2 used to be, and we is now 7.6. This is to approve the outside agency funding policy, and Commissioner Ward had some questions.
Yes, I apologize. I wasn't part of that discussion last time. And with the length of our packet, maybe it's in there. There was a question of, do you receive funds from other public entities? And it's just a yes or a no. I guess I would like to know if they do, how much? It just appeared to me a yes or no question on the application. And maybe I'm wrong there. So that was a question I had. How much if they get some from other agencies, how much? And then, let's see. I would like to know their total budget. If we're providing 20,000 out of $100,000 budget, I guess I just would like to know what their total budget is. We don't ask, I didn't see that in any of the discussion. And let's see, is there any, for their programs that they run, is there any residency requirements for the people they serve? And I don't know. I mean, are they serving only Winona County residents, or do they cross over into, other counties? I don't know. But I would like to know. Those were 3 questions that I had concerning that policy. And I don't know if Ms. Holte's able to provide those, or if I can just get the answers and we can, bring it back for the next meeting.
Yeah, we would have to bring it back. I don't have the answers to those questions right now.
Okay.
So you're just talking about adding 3 more lines or 3 more
Well,
questions?
we kind of got the questions there, but clarity, yeah. 3 more lines.
Do we want to table this until
The next meeting,
or administration
which would be
ready
August,
to bring it back?
August 8th.
August 8th,
Yeah, yeah. If you could have them by the 8th. I mean, I don't want to hold it up because I know these people are going to be submitting requests, but those were pieces that I felt were important.
So you'll let her know what those are and then try to weave them into the form?
We'll
Yeah.
figure out a way,
Okay.
if that's the desire of the board.
What were they again? I'm sorry.
Well, I wanted to know the question, do you receive funds from other public agencies? And it was just a yes or no. And if it's yes, how much? And then is there, what's the total budget of the organization? So we have some idea how dependent they are on county funding. And then is there any, for their programs that they run, is there any residency requirement? If we're giving them Winona County property tax dollars, are they serving Winona County? Are they serving, multiple counties? Wisconsin, Iowa, where do they?
So
do their
like the
services?
third thing you're stating is a question, as opposed to the first 2 things would just be additions to add to the form, right?
Right.
I guess.
Well, the third one's a question too. I mean, is there any residency requirement for their program?
Okay. So you're just asking if there is one?
Right.
Okay. I think most people, the answer will be no, because it's too hard to track that, et cetera. But you just want to know if there is. Okay.
Okay.
I'd be fine with those additions.
I think we want a motion to table. I think if that's what we.
I'll move to table.
I'll second that.
Okay. Commissioner Ward has moved and Commissioner Bagley has seconded, tabling item 7.6, approving the outside agency funding policy to the August 8th meeting. Is there any discussion, any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
If anyone's opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Okay, items.
Thank you.
What was 6.7, now 7.7, approve the amended LELS 61 labor agreement wage grid.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay, Commissioner Olson's moved, Commissioner Bagley has seconded. Is there further discussion?
I will not approve it because I see no performance pay clauses initiated in it.
There's no further discussion. All those in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. That concludes our business. Commissioner Ward had an announcement.
Real quick, I've seen the hour. Family Night on the Farm is coming up. I haven't seen too much publicity about it, but it is, I believe, August 3rd. And it will be at the Nelson Farm, which is in the Altura area. And so look forward to some more publicity to know all the details of it. But right now I don't have any details. But
Thanks.
always a good county event.
It is. And they have a really cool farm. Commissioner Vagley, you have some comments or announcements?
Two things. Thank you to Ms. Holte and everybody else in the county who have been working. Is the correct name the Mental Health Collaborative, the Mental Health Working Group? I really enjoyed last Wednesday's joint City Council County Board. That's a meeting. It's very rare to have us together, but it's a very important reason to call us together. So thank you for what you're doing, and I hope we can see more of that in the future. That was fantastic. And then lastly, August 8th, special election. I just want to encourage folks to get out and vote. I was at a Goodview City Council meeting last night, and the Goodview City Council, the Goodview City Manager asked about, is there some threshold at which you can combine polling places? Because in the primary, in a 13-hour time period, there were 2 voters in that Goodview polling place. Was it 3? He said 2. Okay, either way, not very many. But so he asked, and I checked with Ms. Wilbright, and they really do have to, unfortunately, keep open no matter what. I think it's just, this is an unusual election. There are no other races on the ballot, et cetera. But I think it's important for folks to get out and vote. It's an important election. It's not countywide, but I hope folks have it on the radar. It's tough in the middle of summer when folks are on vacation, but good luck to everybody who's running that night. That's it.
Okay, that concludes our business.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Everyone is ready. Okay, Commissioner Olson moves, Vaguely seconds, adjournment. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.